Certain weapons are exclusively wielded by the most privileged. These aren't just any weapons, they are divine. Each one is a dazzling manifestation of its owner's very soul. And because of this, they are imbued with incredible power, unleashing truly unique and devastating abilities. The noble catastrophe duchy once vanquished the fearsome evil god. From the moment they're born, its members are blessed with it all. Bodies crafted for combat, and an exceptional, innate talent for battle. Plus, incredible divine weapons. Our protagonist, born into this very family, dreams of becoming a legendary hero, proudly wielding the powerful divine weapon he'd surely possess. At least, that's how it was supposed to be. But during the sacred oracle ceremony, where one's divine weapon awakens, he discovered a shocking truth. He wouldn't have one at all. It was an unprecedented event in the entire history of his family, making him the very first, devastating failure. Consequently, he was immediately branded as inferior, suffering relentless and cruel humiliation, dubbed a public embarrassment by all. The family's second son, Zane, naturally felt no sympathy for this useless brother. People like him, who fail to obtain a divine weapon, simply don't belong in this prestigious place. He used this belief as an excuse to violently massage the protagonist's face, in a most unintentional and brutal manner, essentially performing temporary facial harmonization sessions on him. Jessica and Sarah watched the scene unfold, completely unmoving. Jessica, in particular, seemed to revel in these cruel humiliation sessions. Sarah, on the other hand, was clearly distraught by what was happening. She tried to intervene, desperate to put a stop to it, but Jessica swiftly tripped her, sending her sprawling to the ground. Jessica did this because Sarah had been explicitly called there to observe, to witness firsthand what befalls those who are weak and without a future. She was absolutely not meant to intervene. Seeing Jessica ruthlessly step on his friend's head, he was instantly filled with dread, but he was still in the midst of his involuntary massage session and was harshly reminded of his own helpless position. His aggressor sneered, "Filthy hybrids are always too attached to each other." And while relentlessly beating him, he continued to hurl vile insults. They were both children of concubines, making them outcasts, and were relentlessly humiliated, constantly called mutts by the others. After the brutal beating, he tearfully apologized to Sierra for being too weak to protect her. With a radiant smile, the girl bravely told him not to worry, as she had promised to always stand faithfully by his side. But the boy's heart burned. He refused to remain in this helpless state. He vowed to her that he would become stronger, incredibly stronger, even without the power of a divine weapon. He also swore, with his very life, that he would protect her. After a heartfelt embrace, she tearfully thanked him for that solemn promise. And yet, he was utterly unable to live up to that promise. Barely days later, he was brutally cast out from his family. Grief and a burning rage instantly consumed him, for he knew, with chilling certainty, she would be persecuted. He needed to grow strong enough to tear her from that place. Mastering ordinary weapons would prove utterly useless, not against a knight with a glorious divine weapon. Thus, he was compelled to become impossibly stronger. In truth, he had absolutely no other choice. He slammed a bag overflowing with money onto the shop's counter. Displaying the gleaming gold, he declared he'd take one weapon of each type. An utterly bizarre request, indeed. The shopkeeper thought the boy was gearing up for a personal war. 2 long years had passed since his family exile. On horseback, he pressed onward, his journey unceasing. The boy had mastered many skills, yet still lacked a divine weapon. Now, before him stood numerous dangerous monsters, but he possessed a formidable arsenal to unleash upon them. He was practically itching to finally jump into the fray, for he had mastered every single one, becoming truly formidable. He even wielded a blazing firearm, absolutely ideal for collecting dues from delinquent borrowers. Against him, the creature stood absolutely no chance. As the battle finally reached its epic conclusion, a mysterious hooded man had been silently observing, until he finally chose to speak directly to the boy. He asked if the boy truly always carried all those weapons, and if this was the concern of one who failed to obtain a divine weapon. He'd already forgotten the trap he'd laid, and was now seeking someone he could truly trust. Someone brimming with the potential to rise as a great hero. Our young protagonist, though, could only form one distinct impression of this mysterious figure. His words seemed like nothing but the ramblings of a madman. But then, an intense blue glow blazed forth from the man's hand, unleashing a searing bolt of energy straight toward the boy. A dazzling object materialized before him, unmistakably a weapon, leaving our protagonist genuinely stunned by the unfolding spectacle. The man stated his trust, leaving that powerful weapon with the boy. Still embedded in the ground, the object pulsed, radiating fierce energy. Believing it to be a sword, he began his cautious approach. Until, with a gasp, he finally touched it with his hand. Only then did he realize he'd received just the sword scabbard, the legendary divine Sheath of Avalon, an item allowing its user to store their divine or their weapon, passing it on to another worthy person. A sacred relic, passed down from generation to generation. It now houses the mighty weapons of history's 5 greatest heroes. Whoever wields it will possess the finest armaments on the planet. Our boy's determination now burns, focused entirely on achieving complete and total mastery of that incredible item. 3 intense years had now passed since that pivotal event. He stood with his mentor as a colossal dragon soared across the sky. The monstrous creature, absolutely furious, lunged straight at them. It had gathered its scorching flames, ready to unleash utter annihilation, wiping all living beings from the very face of the earth. But that infernal heat held absolutely no concern for our protagonist, who, utterly unimpressed, immediately prepared for battle. He invoked Avalon, and the legendary white sheath materialized in his hand. He gripped it tightly, as if poised to unsheath an unseen, powerful blade. With intense focus, he commanded its latent power to manifest. Then, a blinding radiance erupted from the hallowed relic, and within the boy's hand, a powerful new glow emerged, until, in his grasp, the mighty wind shield of Aegis took solid form. Its power was immense, instantly generating an impenetrable, effective, defensive barrier against the dragon's devastating fiery attack. Ready to counterattack, he then invoked the legendary storm hammer, Mjolnir. He was perfectly poised, ready to annihilate the monstrous creature. Launching himself directly onto the massive dragon, with Mjolnir primed to deliver one colossal, crushing blow. The strike was absolutely devastating. A crushing force of pure power, slamming the creature's head into the ground. A single hit was all it took. His mentor declared that he had truly mastered Avalon's power. He told him he could now finally go to his sister, as not even an S-rank paladin could possibly stop his path. Hearing these words, a powerful surge of hope ignited the protagonist's eyes. With overwhelming joy, he declared he would do exactly as instructed. 5 long years had passed since his unjust banishment, and now he wielded more than ample power to rescue his sister. As he advanced, a fervent hope consumed him, that Sarah was safe, because he was now racing straight to her side, to rescue her from that dreadful place. However, upon reaching the region, he saw a blazing inferno had consumed everything. He had no idea what could have happened, and immediately became consumed by intense worry. Amidst the flames, he spotted several banners raised. He instantly recognized those familiar symbols. They belonged to a rival duchy, the Roth Windsor. A fierce battle was underway, a civil war. This was definitely not good. He burst into the castle, desperately searching for his sister, approaching a massive, imposing gate that was already slightly ajar. But the moment he entered the grand hall, he was met with a devastating, heartbreaking scene. A severely wounded, motionless body lay on the ground. It couldn't be possible. This couldn't have happened. That was the body of his dear sister. He gently took her into his arms, overwhelmed with concern, as the girl showed no reaction. It was possible the very worst had already come to pass. He remembered the heartfelt words he'd spoken to her, and the promise he had utterly failed to keep. He was completely devastated. A heart-wrenching, desperate scream tore through the air of that place, echoing from him after perfecting his incredible power. He still couldn't accomplish the one thing that had fueled his every step for years. A searing bolt of energy rocketed straight for him. It tore right through the boy's body, his chest pierced. A sinister, menacing presence now joined them. That chilling mana? It undoubtedly belonged to an S-rank warrior. The man instantly recognized Bell, the one they had banished. But the boy simply couldn't comprehend how he had been recognized. But none of that mattered anymore, for he would soon join his sister in the afterlife. This was undoubtedly the monster who had taken his sister's life. Raising his blade, he was ready to end the protagonist's life, consumed entirely by destructive grief. But, gravely weakened, he could do absolutely nothing. His chest was pierced once more, with even greater violence. Following these grim events, he suddenly found himself before the priest once more. Looking at his hands, he simply couldn't understand how he had been sent to this very place. That stained glass window was undeniably familiar. He was inside his family's cathedral. The ceremony was underway, and he was certain he had died. If this was the ceremony, then only one explanation could exist. He had returned in time, the priest instructed. him to clasp his hands and visualize his divine equipment. But the boy knew all too well what had happened the first time. At this point in his life, he hadn't yet inherited Avalon, and fully expected to be banished, so he could restart his journey once again. But something entirely different occurred, leaving him astonished. What stood before his eyes was Avalon. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, he knew that this time he would do everything again. With the incredible power he now possessed, he would finally be able to change fate. Nam's real life was about to truly begin. The boy looked down at the sheath in his hands, fully aware of the incredible potential it held. It was something so unusual, so unprecedented, that even the priest, who had never seen anything quite like it before, had something profound to say about it. Anticipating the priest's words, he already knew fighting with a sheath would be utterly impossible, but he was instantly caught off guard. The priest corrected him. That wasn't what he'd planned to say. Even so, the boy, brimming with confidence, told him not to worry. That was the greatest divine weapon in all of existence. Now, walking through the vast castle corridors, he was desperately searching for his sister. If he had returned to the past, she must still be alive. His past. With his past life still a fresh wound, he was consumed by worry for Sarah. Finally, his trembling hand found the door to her room. A girl, perched gracefully by the window, heard the soft click of the door. Sarah turned, greeting him with a radiant, welcoming smile. Indeed, she was vibrantly alive and completely well. She radiated the very same breathtaking beauty he cherished from his memories. Spotting her brother, whom she hadn't expected, brightened her day. The girl quickly moved towards him, ready to embrace him in a warm hug. She also leaned in, eager to hear how his ceremony had unfolded. Yet, the boy remained utterly silent, unable to form a single word. He was simply overwhelmed with joy that she was alive, his hug so sudden and tight. Sarah, feeling his intense grip, wondered if something terrible had happened to him. He still carried the searing regret of failing to save her in his previous life. The phantom ache of that devastating memory was still far too intense to bear. He absolutely refused to let his beloved sister endure that suffering ever again. Now, finally, he could truly fulfill the sacred promise he'd made to himself. It didn't take long, though, for the girl to playfully complain about his crushing hug. "It's too tight," she gasped, but quickly added that she was happy to have received it. Only then did her eyes fall upon something startling on the boy's face. Tears were silently streaming down his cheeks, and she couldn't fathom why. Gently, she ran her hand over his head, offering a tender caress. She lovingly comforted him, whispering that everything would be fine, because they would always have each other. Hearing those tender words, a profound warmth spread through the boy's heart. A curious fact: he had apparently grown up in Alabama. Just then, his brother, known as Amuk, also strode into the room. Noticing how unusually well the Mutts seemed to be getting along, he remarked that he had been searching for Belle for quite some time. This was Zane, who was truly the saddest of them all. The little jerk smirked, announcing that he'd already heard the big news. Apparently, his brother had been given a peculiar item during the ceremony. He scoffed, claiming the priest loved meddling in others' affairs. A true gossip, indeed. Belle calmly confirmed that he had, in fact, received a sheath. His brother, however, couldn't even bother to hide his utter contempt. Laughing uncontrollably, he sneered that a mere sheath was hardly a weapon, and it suited that pathetic soul perfectly. "He'll never be able to fight with times that asterisk," he cackled. "And the two of you together? You're truly nothing but idiots." The protagonist had to clench his fist, knuckles white with suppressed rage. He was sorely tempted to perform an unsanctioned orthodontic procedure, right there on the little jerk's sneering face. Instead, he offered the brat a final chance to take back his venomous words. But the little jerk, in his arrogance, utterly failed to grasp his grave stance. He wasn't accustomed to seeing his half-brother stand up for himself like this. So the protagonist, voice tight, warned him one last time to retract his insults. Sensing that this was an undeniable challenge to his authority, the little jerk's eyes blazed, filled with an even deeper, burning hatred. "Now," he seethed, "I'll teach the concubine's son a lesson." Unfortunately, for the little jerk, the protagonist possessed years of intense, brutal training with his mentor, and landed a powerful strike directly to his stomach. He made sure the boy would reflect on his actions from now on. The poor kid only avoided vomiting his lunch, because the food had already passed the point of no return. He collapsed onto the ground, curled up. Maybe he'd felt the blow to his liver and his blood pressure had dropped. Looking down at the little jerk, the protagonist advised him not to threaten Sierra again, or he might be forcefully re-educated in proper manners. Frustrated, the little jerk called his half-brother a bastard. Now he was going to take the violence to the next level. With his divine weapon, he promised to make his brother beg for forgiveness. He would scorch his skin. Seeing that the little jerk wanted a serious fight, then so be it. He told Sarah to step back. Things were about to get fun. But he reassured her first, telling her everything would be fine. He would handle this situation with ease. Preparing for battle, he summoned the mighty Avalon into his hand. Now he was armed with the mysterious sheath. His brother refused to believe he could be defeated by an object that wasn't even a weapon. After all, he was already an E-ranked paladin. A bastard like him would never stand a chance. That was somewhat relevant. Paladins were divided into ranks. Everything depended on their strength. Upon receiving their divine weapon, they were automatically classified as F rank. By channeling mana into their weapon, they advanced to E rank. From D rank and above, that same mana could be used for special attacks. To surpass B rank, one had to master the unique abilities of their equipment. It was bizarre that the little jerk was bragging about being E rank. He still had a long way to go. The protagonist didn't even feel challenged by this. His overwhelming confidence only made the little jerk even more furious. Being even more provocative, he said his brother was being very cute. That was the last straw. He was going to strike the mutt with overwhelming force. Sarah became worried, certain that things could take a dangerous turn. Placing his hands on the sheath, he invoked the Sword of Light. Before them appeared Caliburn, a truly formidable sword. The little jerk couldn't believe it. His weapon's flames were useless against that. Not to mention, he had no idea what that sword even was. The counterattack caused the little jerk to lose his balance. Even more surprising was that his divine weapon had been cut by that sword. The boy looked on in fear. Utterly overwhelmed, he finally grasped his defeat. His mind reeled, utterly unable to fathom what just happened. He swore there had been nothing. Asterisk. Absolutely nothing asterisk. Inside that sheath. The protagonist advanced, coolly asking if he was quite satisfied now, or if perhaps he'd prefer to grovel for forgiveness right this instant. Like a pathetic, sore loser, he whined, claiming he'd been tricked. He insisted he never knew the boy was armed. Had he known, he'd never have attacked because he was a coward. He even dared to threaten him, vowing he wouldn't forget this slight. Then, he fled from the room, utterly terrified, and with his undies utterly obliterated. But the protagonist wasn't letting him off the hook. This wasn't over yet. In his hand now sat Ragnarok, a lead-spitting dispenser of pure fire. With his target locked, he fired a single, chilling shot. The poor soul frantically tried to escape. He instantly realized the bullet had whizzed dangerously close to his face, striking the wall mere inches in front of him. Staring at the smoking crater left by the bullet, he was paralyzed with fear. Everything was rapidly spiraling into a whirlwind of utter confusion for him. How could the boy now be wielding a completely different weapon? He just used a sword! It utterly defied logic for him to possess more than one divine weapon. The protagonist coolly advised him never to forget this moment. He warned him not to provoke Sierra again. Either way, it was entirely up to him what he would do from now on. And besides, the little jerk had no more underwear left to ruin. His terror only intensified. With eyes as cold as a loan shark collecting overdue debts, he chillingly warned that the repercussions of the little jerk's actions could earn him a hole in his forehead. Desperate, the little jerk ran off to save his own life, while the protagonist coolly put away his divine weapon. Sarah, who had witnessed everything, was utterly spellbound. She was fine, but eagerly wanted to know if those weapons were indeed her brother's divine armament, so he reminded her. He had already told her she could trust everything to his hands. The girl found it incredibly awesome, and all the protagonist wanted was to continue protecting that beautiful smile. He swore he would never lose to anyone, ever again. Elsewhere, the little jerk scurried off to report what had happened. He had gone straight to his father, telling the Duke he had been humiliated like a dog. The Duke was quite intrigued that Belle had received multiple divine weapons. The little jerk vehemently insisted that it wasn't normal. Belle must have made a pact with Bill's Bob, the lung shark. And because of that, he should be banished immediately. But the Duke merely ignored his words. He was utterly captivated by the thrilling prospect of a mighty heir. Leaping from his throne, he utterly ignored the brat. He overheard a question. Where was his father off to? He soon realized he was going to see Belle. He absolutely had to confirm if this unbelievable news was truly real. Following that intense ordeal, the young boy desperately needed to rest. He collapsed onto his bed, eager to recuperate. He had triumphed in battle, yet he was still trapped in a child's body. The toll was immense. He was utterly exhausted. He still hadn't mastered control over his mana, you see. That should have been a blazing fire shot, but it merely fizzled into a regular attack. He was undeniably stuck at F rank. His strength absolutely had to improve. He knew he absolutely couldn't remain at this measly power level. He began to vividly recall the battle he'd witnessed. It was the Refenzers. That distinct symbol was undeniably theirs. They were a family with a long-standing, bitter rivalry. Anything could have been the trigger to reignite that ancient conflict. Surely, the one who had attacked him must have hailed from that very family. But this time, things would be drastically different. He would protect his sister. And to achieve that, he also needed to command more respect within his own family. Suddenly, the doors to his room dramatically swung open. The young boy's gaze snapped to the figure who had just entered. It had been quite a while since their last encounter, and he had no idea why his father was here. Galleon, who had accomplished legendary feats in the grand battle that erupted 20 years ago, had fought against the evil god himself, all alone. He ruthlessly carved his path through the sinister dark continent, relying solely on his formidable sword. Many recognized him as the legendary sword saint. And there, standing right beside his father, was that little brat. Now, the reason for his father's visit became perfectly clear. He was undoubtedly being accused of something serious. But for him, this was absolutely the perfect situation. The quickest route to gaining recognition was to be noticed, directly by the head of the family. With a deep bow, he meticulously showed his respect to the Duke. The old man remarked that the boy had changed tremendously since their last meeting. But this time, he had come as a father and gently asked him to relax. With profound maturity, Bell declared that simply wasn't possible. Even a single word could be misinterpreted, and he needed to bear full responsibility before the Duke. The old man was utterly charmed by the sheer maturity of this snot-nosed kid. He then asked the boy to rise, and so he promptly did. And he would indeed do exactly as the boy suggested. He would remain there as the Duke, whose presence immediately became absolutely overwhelming. The Duke's imposing pressure was truly terrifying. He had just learned his sons had fought, and sibling conflicts were absolutely forbidden. Bell, however, showed a flicker of regret, while the little jerk grinned, convinced he'd see the bastard punished. And swiftly, no one in that house dared defy the Duke's formidable power, but Bell, the boy, had already braced himself. He declared that he and his younger sister were harassed. Hearing this confession, the Duke roared, asking if his orders had been violated all over childishness. The boy affirmed it once more, adding, he had absolutely no regrets. The Duke, taken aback, demanded if he truly felt no remorse for defying his orders. Bell retorted that abandoning those he loved was a far greater disgrace for a paladin. He vowed to fight to protect his sister, even if his opponent was his own older brother. As Bell spoke, the Duke's gaze bore into him, intently observing. This was the true path of the knight Bell yearned to walk. Then, the Duke aimed the tip of his mighty sword at him. He challenged Bell, asking what he'd do if he were his opponent. But Bell stood firm, resolute. He wouldn't hesitate, even if his opponent was the Duke himself. The old man tried to crush him with his intimidating gaze, but ultimately, he admired his son's unwavering resilience. He declared he would let this incident be overlooked, much to the little jerk's utter dismay. Then, looking at Zane, he expressed disappointment that he'd harassed his sister and lost the fight. The little jerk was utterly floored, having never expected such a dressing down. The Duke then scolded him, saying he should be ashamed and never show his face before him again. He understood Bell's bold choice, and acknowledged his courage in speaking out. Knowing the dire consequences, Bell apologized for his reckless actions, but his father declared that was precisely the attitude he expected from catastrophe knights. Now, he wanted Bell to show him his true power. He demanded to see his divine armament, and Bell complied instantly. A brilliant blue light began to surge between his outstretched hands. The Duke was utterly stunned. That sheath was Avalon itself, his divine armament. But to the Duke, this made no sense. He had heard rumors of the legendary blade, a weapon said to carry the spirit of the original paladin. It was a relic wielded by great heroes throughout history. He asked if it was true Bell had used both a sword and a firearm, and Bell confirmed it. He explained those weapons resided within Avalon, and to prove his words, he flawlessly materialized both for his father. Immediately, the Duke's mind reeled. Was this even possible? And to his utter, total surprise, he heard Bell could only use 2 weapons at a time, but there were 3 more times legendary weapons still held within the sheath. His son was undoubtedly destined to be the next great hero. He declared he held no interest in the boy's past weakness, But from this moment forward, he held incredibly high expectations. As he exited the room, he commanded him to keep working hard. The doors finally swung shut, and the boy could finally rest. That immense pressure had been absolutely overwhelming. He just needed to keep improving. But it was such a shame. He was trapped within a child's frail body. He needed to reach D rank as quickly as humanly possible, and for that, he had to hunt monsters to absorb more mana. He would venture to the nearest forest to hunt some orcs. The monster had finally fallen, and the head of one of the creatures lay on the ground, gruesomely separated from its body in the forest. A brutal slaughter continued, leaving the creatures utterly powerless, because something far fiercer and deadlier was there. The beast's teeth were as sharp as deadly iron swords. It roared furiously, powerfully asserting its dominance. That forest certainly brought back nostalgic memories after being banished in his past life. He had trained there for some time, but something here felt undeniably strange. He had been walking for a while and hadn't encountered any monsters. Yet, from within the bushes, a creature watched him. He finally came across some orcs, but they were in pieces. Their mangled remains were now part of the forest's grim decor. It was a scene as terrifying as it was utterly unusual, and as he tried to make sense of this unsettling scene, he was suddenly startled by a terrifying sound. The boy whirled around to see what it was. An attack was already in motion, and he had to defend himself. The force was greater than his own, sending him flying. This was certainly not the creature he wanted to encounter. That was undeniably Fenrir. The reason there were no monsters in the forest was because of this E-rank creature. He barely had any mana left and was, at most, an E-rank. It would be a miracle if he could leave immediately. Looking into the creature's eyes, he knew he would be executed on the spot. The boy needed to stay alert to avoid becoming dog food. Caught off guard, he realized the monster's speed was far greater than he had expected. He had to throw himself out of the way of the attack. In his hands, he summoned the fire spring pistol, firing several shots at the creature. But it managed to dodge them all. Now, he was in real trouble, without a doubt. Since his mana was still so low, his bullets weren't fast enough. The firearm wouldn't be effective. He needed to try something else. With his sword in hand, he charged at his attacker. Paul, the terrifying beast, presented a formidable threat. Yet, the boy skillfully dodged its devastating strike. And just like that, a potential opening surfaced for him. He lashed out, but the creature surprisingly evaded his attack too. That was truly unexpected. He hadn't seen that coming. A complete strategy rethink was needed. He was staring real danger right in the face. If he were at his peak power, right now, this forest menace would already be annihilated. The enraged wolf charged him once more, a blur of fury. Bell knew he couldn't possibly match that incredible speed, so he braced himself, forced to defend against the onslaught. Unavoidably, he ended up taking some serious damage. He was cornered, trapped, unable to escape the relentless barrage. Slowly, steadily, the monstrous creature was overwhelming him, relentlessly advancing forward, ready to claim him as its afternoon snack. But he remembered, he had just reincarnated. He absolutely couldn't let his new life end this quickly. He had to summon Achilles' shield. That way he could both defend times and times counterattack. However, the creature's agility proved too formidable. It caught him off guard from the side, sending the boy tumbling, completely losing his grip on the shield. This fight couldn't possibly continue at this devastating pace, or he'd definitely become that aggressive dog's next meal. All the weapons he'd used so far had been utterly ineffective, and even wielding the mighty hammer against it would be tough, with its attacks being far too slow. Only one weapon remained to try now. With no other choice, he had to unleash it immediately. The creature was poised, ready to finish him off for good. The boy closed his eyes, focusing intensely, and just as the blow descended, he called Aegis to his side. But the creature's attack had already landed. Then, unexpectedly, nothing happened at all. A gauntlet now gleamed in his hand, wreathed in dark energy. He hadn't wanted to use it, but anything was better than dying a second time. The creature braced, ready to attack once more. Indeed, it had somehow become even times faster asterisk. But the battle was already decided. The boy, too, had become much faster. With the hammer gripped tight, he was now hovering above the creature. It wouldn't be able to keep up with him anymore, and that hammer was already poised to absolutely crush skulls. A precise, devastating blow landed square on the creature, which writhed in agony, its teeth audibly rearranging themselves. Aegis, the gauntlet of darkness, magnified its wielder's physical strength. But that wasn't its only power. Whoever used it would inevitably begin to hear a voice, constantly giving them orders to destroy. The wolf was still alive and even more furious. Time passed, the wielder only grew stronger, and his desire to take a life intensified. He eagerly awaited the creature's next approach, dodging all the attacks coming his way. Now the wolf was at a disadvantage, and the boy seemed to be thoroughly enjoying himself. At last the wolf no longer belonged to the world of the living. The protagonist was relieved to have ended it quickly. That weapon couldn't be removed in battle, and its effects grew stronger over time, dragging its user into darkness. Now he needed to understand why there was a Fenrir in that forest. While he was thinking, he noticed something different about the hammer. It seemed to be completely charged with energy. By defeating the creature, he could now use its attributes. Defeating powerful creatures was better than taking down weak monsters. He couldn't wait to test it out. In the castle garden, his sister enjoyed the afternoon under the shade of a tree. At last the flower crown was complete. She hoped her brother would like the gift, but someone snatched the crown from her hands. The girl sneered, saying the flower crown was hideous, but that was fitting for a filthy girl like the one who made it. That wretched girl's name was Jessica. She wanted to know what Spencer thought about it. Bizarre-looking boy agreed with Jessica. He was there only to obey her. As she tossed the flower crown into the air, it was immediately destroyed. Spencer had used a whip to do it. Sarah didn't like that, but she was defenseless. Jessica was bored. There was nothing to do there. With a weapon in hand, she invited Sierra to go with her. It was time for her to practice and improve her aim, firing a shot at the girl who cowered in fear. Bell appeared, blocking the shot with his sheath. Declaring that he would play with Jessica instead, Sierra was shocked. She hadn't seen him arrive. In fact, she was completely unaware of her surroundings. She never noticed anyone coming. Bell said he was also looking for an excuse to test his divine armament. But Jessica didn't understand what was happening. No mat was going to get in her way. Bell was too busy trying to comfort his sister, telling her everything would be fine. And now he had something to take care of with the arrogant girl. The boy with the horrendous hair tried to position himself in an intimidating stance. Bell knew this guy served Jessica, making him nothing more than a subordinate. So, he asserted his position, standing tall as the Duke's formidable son. But he absolutely refused to show even an ounce of respect to a mere son of a concubine. No way. This only further infuriated our protagonist, Jessica. She demanded to know why he was so ridiculously confident, claiming he was weak and only got lucky against Zane. They all believed our protagonist had simply stumbled upon luck, and that Zane had been nothing but careless. And since he was only using a scabbard as a weapon, he must surely be the weakest of the weak. Closing his eyes, he calmly told her it would be better if she saw for herself, if what he possessed was mere luck, or genuine talent. Jessica hadn't expected such a retort. An unsettling feeling began to creep in. She immediately commanded Spencer, "Take care of that trash." A task Spencer would execute with immense pleasure. Wherever his whip struck, ice formed. Yet Bell remained utterly unimpressed. Spencer, a D-rank paladin, wielded an ice whip as his divine armament. He was far stronger than this mere E-rank little jerk. But remember, the protagonist is always the protagonist. Spencer declared he'd freeze Bell's legs, ensuring no escape, then his arms and body, until he couldn't move an inch. Finally, he'd slap his face until it was utterly unrecognizable. Bell retorted, "You talk too much. Now, this side." Character would be starkly reminded of his true place. Spencer, enraged, warned him, "Don't underestimate me. Now, I'll turn you into an ice pop." The whip lashed out toward Bell, but our boy, with impossible ease, simply dodged it. Jessica couldn't believe her eyes. How could he possibly do that? For a mere D-rank paladin, Spencer wasn't bad, but he was still just a side character. And our protagonist had trained relentlessly in his past life, remember? This was nothing more than a child's mere pastime. Sarah, watching, was even more utterly impressed. Her brother seemed to be effortlessly dancing through the air. Meanwhile, Spencer's irritation boiled over into outright fury. He snarled that his victim only knew how to run away. So Bell decided it was time to show them he wasn't running. From now on, he wouldn't dodge anymore. Everyone present was absolutely shocked by his overwhelming confidence. Bell wanted to see if the arrogant fool could actually follow through on his empty threats. Spencer, completely falling for the provocation, charged forward to attack. "Now, I'll freeze you completely," he roared. The whip struck toward Bell, who stood with his arms wide open. It hit him multiple times, but shockingly, nothing happened. Sarah grew very worried. The ice, finally, began to form. His arms and legs were now completely frozen. If he couldn't move, it was time for Spencer to strike his face. But Bell simply asked, Is that truly all you can do? Because if it was, then it was finally his turn to attack. Spencer froze, the words striking him with unexpected force. Bel instantly invoked Ragnarok, his will absolute. The sheath at his hip pulsed with a brilliant, ethereal light, and in his grasp, a formidable firearm materialized. To the arrogant fool, wielding two divine weapons was utterly inconceivable. To shatter the icy prison, Bel began unleashing his surging mana. And from the gun's barrel, a scorching torrent of flames erupted. Now, he was utterly free, his movements unrestrained once more. Jessica stared, disbelief etched across her face. Bel's actions defied possibility. That he actually possessed two divine armaments, let alone wield their unique attributes with such devastating effectiveness. Now, the time had come to mete out swift punishment to this arrogant being. He blasted Spencer with an inferno of raging, focused flames. Spencer realized his peril, frantically scrambling to defend himself. Wielding his ice whip, he encased his body in a defensive, thick frost. He foolishly believed this icy shield could repel the scorching assault. Bel knew it was futile. The searing flames advanced relentlessly. The fiery projectile ripped clean through that thick block of ice. Spencer stared, horrified, as he faced such a brutal, crushing defeat. The projectile slammed into his chest with immense force. The impact didn't pierce him, yet inflicted considerable, searing damage. He crumpled to the ground, much to Jessica's utter horror. The mud had shattered the ice and utterly decimated an E-rank paladin. And being merely E-rank herself, she knew her chances were non-existent. The protagonist's gaze settled upon her, cold and unwavering. He declared it was all over, as the girl nervously summoned her divine armament. "Don't come any closer," she pleaded, her voice choked by overwhelming fear. Her hands trembled so violently she could barely grip her weapon. She unleashed a barrage of shots, but each one wildly missed its mark. Desperate, she shrieked for him not to advance a single step, but her legs buckled beneath her. She stumbled and collapsed, for fear, raw and potent, permeated every inch of that space. Bel loomed before her, and Jessica's terror swelled into a tidal wave. Before her stood a being capable of extinguishing her life with a mere whim. His voice firm, he warned her never to trouble Sierra again. Again, the girl couldn't utter a word. She was utterly paralyzed. Her only option was to escape, while any shred of time remained. Sarah rushed to her brother, her face radiating profound gratitude. Anxiously, she asked if the whip had caused him any harm, but he scoffed. Spencer was pitifully weak. Sarah, in awe, praised Bel's immense strength, yet he insisted he was strong only to protect her. She then proudly presented him with a delicate flower crown. She'd crafted it herself, since his previous one was destroyed. Gently, she placed it upon Bel's head with a tender smile. She thanked him, her protector, for always being by her side. Bel had received a precious gift from his beloved sister. One day, he vowed to make the entire nation revere her pure, kind soul. The only hurdle, everyone then despised, the children of concubines, making proving his worth incredibly difficult. He desperately needed to carve out his own respect. And for that, there was a crucial task he absolutely had to conquer right away. Outside the palace, the Duke stood in deep meditation, his hand firm upon his sword. His focus was incredibly intense, a sight to behold. After some time, he fluidly executed a series of sharp cuts through the air. He effortlessly sliced through falling leaves, and only then did he perceive that Bel had quietly drawn near him. He inquired what purpose the young boy had in approaching him. Bel had arrived to humbly request the Duke's permission, piquing his interest. The Duke then asked precisely what the boy wished to ask of him. Before uttering his request, he respectfully knelt before the powerful Duke. The Duke found himself quite impressed by such unexpected formality. Bel desired to undertake the demanding admission exam for C rank. The Duke appeared genuinely intrigued by the boy's bold request. Bel explained his ambition to serve the king, proudly representing his house. To ensure the duchy maintained its esteemed recognition, his family held vital obligations, especially towards the royal family. These included crucial escort missions and the dangerous elimination of fearsome monsters. Accomplishing these feats was the swiftest path for him to gain significant status and respect within his own esteemed family. That way, he would earn immense recognition by triumphing over the most challenging tasks. To seize the most prestigious missions, he absolutely had to pass this critical exam. Gazing at the boy, the Duke discerned that he harbored truly grand ambitions. However, he made his stance unequivocally clear. It was far too soon for him to attempt that particular exam. He needed to first become a full-fledged paladin before even dreaming of a C rank. And at this very moment, He was merely an F-rank recruit, having only just received his divine armament. He should utterly focus on the E-rank exam first. But what the Duke absolutely didn't expect was that the boy had something incredible to reveal to him. Presenting a fearsome fang directly to him, Bell boldly asked if this sight was enough to finally change his mind. The Duke instantly recognized it. That was undoubtedly a Fenrir fang. Immediately, he demanded to know how the boy had possibly obtained such a rare item. Without a moment's hesitation, Bell revealed one of his divine weapons. The mighty hammer was now crackling, fully charged with intense electricity. Bell admitted it had been quite a challenge, a little difficult, but he had indeed managed to discipline that notoriously stubborn monster. Witnessing the raw, powerful energy surrounding that hammer, the Duke immediately realized the boy could already wield attributes. Moreover, he had incredibly managed to defeat a terrifying D-rank creature. The boy was undeniably strong and thus absolutely eligible for the C-rank exam. He would permit the boy to take the exam, but under one critical condition. He was not to even remotely consider the possibility, ever, of disappointing the esteemed duchy. Filled with brimming confidence and profound gratitude, Bell assured him he never, ever would. Upon arriving at the bustling exam site, he immediately noticed that a throng of candidates had already gathered. This was because C-rank represented an imposing, insurmountable wall for countless aspirants, a challenge many found utterly impossible to overcome. The surprisingly small boy instantly captured the attention of all the other candidates. Many were already full-grown adults, while he was just a small child. He made his way to the exam reception, where the attendant wanted to know who he was, and if his father was with him. But she was utterly stunned to learn he was there to take the exam himself. She suggested he simply return when he was older. But the boy demanded not to be treated like a child. He was a paladin too. As they spoke, someone suddenly approached Bell, telling him to stop playing pretend at being a paladin. Little kids like him had no business being in this place. He should leave immediately. The protagonist had no idea what this person's problem was, but he knew it spelled trouble. The others, however, knew exactly who this figure was. His name was Lennox, and he was currently the strongest D-rank paladin. Whispers claimed his divine armament, the Wind Sword, executed 8 lightning-fast slashes every time it was wielded. A truly impressive ability, and he already had numerous fans. Lennox warned that if the child insisted on taking the exam, he should, at the very least, be as good as times him asterisk. Bell didn't even know this guy was famous among his peers. Meanwhile, this new side character doubted whether the protagonist even possessed a divine armament. Holding the sheath at his waist, Bell said it was right there with him. But seeing that it was just a sheath, the young man began to laugh, thinking it must be impossible to fight with such trash. Other side characters started laughing as well. They'd never imagined that a divine armament could be so utterly useless, and they were grateful they weren't as pathetic. Lennox said he didn't care if an ignorant child wanted to throw his life away like that, but it truly annoyed him that his participation in the exam put them on the same level, as if they were equals. Taking his leave, he warned that the little piece of trash should return to his mother's lap. With that annoying session over, Bell firmly told the secretary to register him immediately. She wanted to know if he was sure, but he was unwavering. For that, he needed a recommendation from a B rank, knight or higher, and he also needed to be at least D rank himself. With that recommendation letter, he should then be able to participate, resolving all issues. The girl knew it was highly unlikely anyone would recommend a child, but as she read the letter, she realized it came from the Duke of Catastrophe himself. Only then did she finally realize that the child before her was also the Duke's son. The participants then gathered in the arena, the very place where the exam would take place. The instructor began giving instructions on how the exam would work. First up, they'd be warped right into a dungeon, all thanks to that mysterious teleportation stone, of course. They had just 5 hours to snag a jewel of light and return. A total of 3 coveted jewels of light were hidden within. Only those cunning enough to claim a jewel would earn that coveted promotion. The utterly arrogant side character was absolutely certain he was born to win. His rivals, however, seemed visibly shaken and utterly intimidated. Meanwhile, our protagonist felt a surge of pure second-hand embarrassment. Once the rules were laid out, the instructor boomed, "Is everyone ready?" Witnessing the overwhelmingly enthusiastic response, the exhilarating exam kicked off without a moment's delay. Then, it was our protagonist's turn to step up and vanish into the dungeon via the teleportation stone. The air shimmered, the room pulsed with an intense glow, and suddenly, he found himself whisked away to an entirely new, mysterious realm. It felt as though he'd just blinked through an otherworldly portal. He had finally arrived, deep within the heart of the cave. It appeared everyone had been scattered to different starting points, on the first floor. So he had to instantly decide which path to bravely forge ahead on. Though the dungeon was vast, he still had ample time to conquer its challenges. And with this golden opportunity presenting itself, it would be a tragic waste not to capitalize on every single moment. This dungeon teemed with countless monstrous creatures, and the more terrifying monsters he could decisively defeat, the stronger his mana would explosively grow. Instantly, he tightened his grip on his sword, absolutely determined to hunt down every single creature lurking within. Elsewhere, deep within the treacherous dungeon, the other candidates were desperately struggling against the beasts. These monstrous creatures were truly formidable and incredibly dangerous. The lizard's eyes gleamed with a terrifying, violent malice, a gaze more than enough to completely paralyze the faint of heart. The utterly arrogant side character simply couldn't comprehend why anyone was struggling against such pathetic, weak creatures. He could annihilate them with a wide, confident grin, barely breaking a sweat as he did so. His effortless feats earned him the awestruck admiration of the weaker candidates, and so, he continued to mercilessly cut down the monsters. Overconfident, he boldly declared that he was no mediocre weakling like the rest. Honestly, he found the entire difficulty level utterly frustrating. The other side characters, however, were more than happy to trail behind him, knowing they'd remain perfectly safe with them. Lennox then grandly declared they had the privilege of witnessing his skills, up close and personal, and that weaklings like them were merely fit for aimlessly wandering about. After diligently exploring the dungeon's winding paths, for a while, the group finally stumbled upon a massive, imposing door. That times had times to be the entrance to the final chamber. He simply times hoped, times he could finally find some times real times entertainment beyond it. Unexpectedly, this place was crawling with multiple D-rank monsters, and the precious jewels gleamed, resting upon an ancient altar, perched at the far end of the vast room. One of the monstrous creatures began to stalk menacingly toward the group. Lennox, ever so confident, believed he could slice it to pieces. He unleashed a flurry of slashes, targeting the monster. But its body was shockingly tough, shrugging off every single blow. Now, it was the creature's turn to counterattack with brute force. For the very first time in this dungeon, the arrogant side character found himself grappling with intense pressure from a monster. The blow was so devastating, it sent him reeling, losing his balance. Yet, he remained utterly stunned that his attacks had absolutely no effect. Even the other side characters, wide-eyed with disbelief, were gaping in shock at the scene. They immediately became worried as the other creatures now fixated their gazes on them. The guy from Clava had to act with desperate speed to save his own life. He managed to land a forceful strike on one of the monsters attacking him, only to be met with the grim realization that physical attacks were utterly useless against this foe. Meanwhile, the woman was fiercely struggling against a swift flying creature. This particular monster could launch deadly attacks with its razor-sharp feathers, keeping her at bay from a distance. Lennox finally grasped the true, terrifying difficulty of this final exam stage. This was a monster capable of resisting every single one of their divine abilities. Against that peculiar sown creature, he was completely ineffective. Terrified and paralyzed, he closed his eyes, bracing himself for the worst. But the terrifying creature was obliterated before it could land a single blow on the candidate. He opened his eyes, still reeling in utter shock. Bell breathed a sigh of relief. If he had arrived a little later, the absolute worst would have happened. He'd actually had quite a bit of fun during his hunting spree. But Lennox instantly recognized him. It was that little piece of trash taking the exam. A monstrous foe, completely immune to physical attacks, was now bearing down on him. Bell knew he had to quickly change strategies to deal with that creature. The divine sword was the absolute ideal weapon for this. Lennox watched, utterly surprised, as the boy's divine armament transformed. Bell finished off that creature with a single, decisive strike. Now, he had to deal with the one flying in the air. He had the perfect equipment for that, capable of firing multiple deadly shots. Riddling the creature's body with a barrage of bullets, he turned it into a winged sieve. The other side characters couldn't believe that the boy was truly this strong, especially considering his divine armament was just an empty sheath. Lennox had absolutely no idea how any of this was possible. For him to wield multiple divine armaments at once, not to mention, the boy had immense, unparalleled mastery over each one. With time running short, he had to finish off the remaining creatures quickly. Peering from the sidelines, the arrogant Side character absolutely couldn't fathom a child being this skilled. While he reeled in shock, our protagonist kept tearing through the creatures. With everything properly taken care of, he just needed to claim a single jewel. He finally reached the altar, where they were waiting. The side characters immediately approached him, ready to begin their inevitable flattery session, something our protagonist found utterly insufferable. They quickly revealed their true, toxic nature, belittling the very one they had just worshipped. Mere moments ago, they declared that compared to the child, he was utterly worthless, and that they had been mistaken about him all along. Lenax's confidence was utterly shattered by that brutal experience. The two side characters believed they would simply claim the remaining 2 jewels. But without a word, Bell summoned his mighty hammer. He had already secured the jewel required for his own approval, and he was ready to put on a truly entertaining show. He struck the altar with a thunderous, powerful blow, to the absolute shock of the 2 groveling side characters. They shrieked, "What the hell have you done?" He had utterly annihilated the remaining jewels. Showing to them the single jewel remaining, he told them, "If you want it so badly, you'll just have to come and get it." Adding that besides being utterly useless, they were nothing but sycophants, leeching off other people's talent. These individuals even reveled in belittling those who had ceased to be useful. They were utterly unworthy of calling themselves knights. Being lectured by a mere child utterly crushed their inflated egos. Bell then exited the room, abandoning the disgraced side characters there. Lennox, surprisingly, seemed to have learned something from that harsh reprimand. He recognized his own glaring weaknesses, admitting that he had indeed been arrogant, and even thanked Bell for it. But he vowed he wouldn't let this be his downfall. Our protagonist found it quite surprising that he had been so honest and still harbored ambitions, confirming that one day their paths would surely cross again. Outside, the boys erupted in celebration. He was finally a C-rank knight, and since he had hunted countless monsters, his mana had increased significantly. Now, he just needed to gain respect within his own household, to finally protect his sister at last. He arrived at the Duke's residence to share the incredible news. But the Duke seemed to be in the middle of a grave meeting. Knights were planning to overthrow the Melia family. 3 B-rank paladins were rapidly approaching their lands, and the Duke's family had been tasked with eliminating them. It seemed that another noble family had recently faced trouble with these very paladins. Ruver revealed a chilling theory, that these knights had actually enchanted their weapons with forbidden, dark spells. The B-rank paladins now understood, with chilling clarity, why they had been summoned. The Duke declared, "They simply could not allow karma to continue like this. They had times to eradicate them, immediately." Suddenly, one of the knights noticed. Someone was missing. Jin wasn't there. He wasn't with them. Just then, a book was decisively placed upon the table. A young man then coolly asked, "What's this meeting all about?" Immediately all heads whipped around to see who it was, and the young man declared, "This organization has already been annihilated, because the one who would become the next Duke, would be the very reason for its downfall." Meanwhile, in another room, one of the maids was carefully bringing a meal to her lady, informing her that the food had finally arrived. Sarah then gently prepares to sit at the table. Being ever so polite, she sincerely thanked the woman for her work, who, without a second glance, left the room, dismissing her gratitude entirely. Sarah seems to be overwhelmingly sad. She looks at her untouched meal, utterly without enthusiasm. Finally, her brother bursts into the room, announcing that he had arrived. He looks at her with an expression of immense joy. Sarah responds with an identical, heartfelt smile. She confesses she didn't know where he had gone and was very worried. Bell informed her that he had to take care of something important, and, even better, that he brought gifts for her. On the table now lies a complete, magnificent meal. Sarah was absolutely delighted with the apple pie that had been brought, and she hopes to eat all of it in the precious company of her brother. But for him, that is not the time to simply enjoy his sister's company. The food is always the same, since even the servants despise the children of concubines. He needs to work incredibly hard to improve his sister's quality of life, immediately. Back with the Duke, the meeting is still in full swing. He's deeply impressed that one of his sons managed to defeat Karma, alone. This can only mean that Jin has already reached level A. As expected from the Duke's eldest son, he's truly on another level. After that, he also took his seat at the table. He wants to know if his father has anything else to say. The Duke then revealed that the king had assigned another crucial task to their family. They were to escort none other than Princess Rilch's shooting villain. She would pass through a city located near the duchy, and they should ensure her a perfectly safe journey. One of the knights openly wondered if the royal guard was not enough. Another quickly responded that the royal family should not yet be informed that karma was no longer a problem. Thus, the safest route should strategically pass through Ricotta. While they were deeply engrossed in conversation, another person dramatically entered the hall. The boy immediately asked them to wait before making any decision. His sudden appearance instantly caught everyone's attention. The knights quickly recognized Bell, but the Duke couldn't hide his immense pleasure in his son's talent. With the exam now clearly finished, Bell proudly displayed his certificate. The young prodigy had officially advanced to level C. To achieve this, at such a tender age, was truly astounding. Now, the Duke demanded to know why Bell had interrupted their meeting. Bell was here to propose an entirely different route for their journey. A knight scoffed, utterly surprised that a mere boy had suggestions to offer. The Ricardo route might be monster-free, Bell began, but that's precisely why it's crawling with bandits, and the journey itself would span 3 arduous days. It would be far better to travel through the monster plane, a knight immediately retorted, warning that such a path was utterly perilous. I know the monsters inhabiting that region, Bell stated confidently. Most are chimeras and horrors of the dark. Both are strictly nocturnal creatures. So, traveling by day would be significantly safer. Not to mention, it would only take a single day to reach our destination. The knight, reluctantly, had to concede his point. After listening intently to the young strategist, the Duke recognized Bell's assertiveness and profound knowledge of monsters. Now, the next question was, what times they thought of his proposition? For the boy desired to be entrusted with this very task. He was utterly confident he could escort the princess safely. Bell's resolute stance made the Duke pause in deep thought. Finally, Jin dramatically interjected into the conversation. A palpable, threatening energy instantly permeated the air. He snarled, demanding to know why this mutt dared speak to them. His aura was so overwhelmingly intense that even a plant on the table wilted and dried, and the other knights recoiled in fear. Bell had nearly forgotten how terrifying his older brother's intimidation was. Even so, Jin's terrifying presence wasn't enough to intimidate him. Revealing his own divine armament, Bell declared he was equally serious. He adamantly affirmed he would escort the princess safely to her destination, no matter what obstacles arose. Intrigued by the boy's unwavering confidence, Jin challenged, "Do you truly believe you could stop me?" Bell simply affirmed, "A knight always keeps his word." Jin's aide then sharply ordered the boy to shut your mouth, accusing his words of blasphemy against Jin himself. This was Razor, his brother's devoted secretary, who must now be a formidable level B paladin. Jin, however, seemed utterly fascinated by the boy. He then ordered his secretary to put Bell to the test. With a flourish, Jin revealed his own divine armament, clearly prepared to utterly overwhelm the young child. He was about to teach a harsh lesson to the son of a concubine. Immediately, Jin began to stalk purposefully towards the boy. Bell, however, remained utterly aware of his surroundings, even as he stood completely still. The secretary was poised to unleash the very first strike. Bell quickly realized this fight would be far tougher than he'd imagined. Even so, he deftly defended himself, a master of efficient combat, a feat that genuinely left the secretary utterly impressed. Jin, too, seemed quite pleased with the impressive display. That was far quicker than I anticipated. Still, it's far too soon for him to conquer a level B paladin in battle. With a voice firm and authoritative, the Duke announced, "That is quite enough," firmly declaring Bell would be responsible for the task ahead. The secretary questioned, "Is the Duke truly serious about this? Especially since karma had already been annihilated by Jin. This would certainly make for an intriguing first mission." Bell respectfully thanked him, promising he would not disappoint. Jin watches the young boy with keen, piercing eyes, but his sinister smile truly hides a darker secret. Bell now needed to make his way to the illustrious royal palace. This would be his very first time ever setting foot in that grand place. He approaches the magnificent gates, ready to make his grand entrance. But he's immediately halted by the vigilant royal guards. They declare he cannot simply walk in, so the boy introduces himself. Presenting his paladin certificate, he informs them he is, in fact, responsible for escorting the revered princess. They struggle to believe such a mere child has already reached level C. Once properly identified, he's permitted through the gates. The guards openly doubt the child's ability to protect her highness, but our protagonist remains completely, resolutely determined. Finally, the elegant carriage of the princess makes its grand arrival. She playfully remarks that her bodyguard is truly very cute. She then apologizes, confirming she won't be needing his help. Meanwhile, the man sitting regally on the throne wants to know if the princess has already departed on her journey. His servant confirms she must already be well on her way. besides numerous guards accompanying Her Royal Highness. The Duke's own son is also a part of her elite escort. He'd heard this son was none other than Belle, who, he mused, must still merely be a child. Imagining, of course, that he must be extremely talented, he instructs his servant to remain exceedingly cautious, authorizing him to deploy his secret weapon if the situation absolutely called for it. Revealing blades in his hands, he stated there would be no need, because his specialty lies in expertly eliminating people before they even realize what's happening. The royal carriage continues its swift journey onward. Inside, we find the princess, our protagonist, and the vigilant guards. This task is deceptively simple, yet holds immense importance. Completing it is absolutely essential to helping his sister. But there's a significant catch to this entire situation. He doesn't feel comfortable here, not even slightly. It seems his welcome was frosty, so, excusing himself, he then dared to ask what might be a rude question. He pressed to understand why the princess had declared him unnecessary. She paused, taking a moment to answer, declaring she detested relying on anyone else, for she possessed a divine armament of her own, and was far from the weakling many imagined. The boy realized she was even more times imperious than he'd first thought. The princess's gaze lingered outside, upon the city, where life simply went on as usual. This sight seemed to ignite a flicker of something new within the princess. She gazed out, her eyes sparkling with fervent enthusiasm. The boy took pleasure in her rare display of joy, but the princess, however, felt visibly uncomfortable with the attention. He swiftly apologized, explaining she strongly reminded him of his own sister, and he was certain she would have reacted the very same way, captivated by the spectacle. The princess then asked if they typically got along well. Belle replied that they often played together when they met. Since she was quite young still, their games were simple affairs. The princess then revealed she had many siblings, yet couldn't trust a single one. He imagined it might stem from fierce conflicts over succession. Belle felt a pang of sympathy, confessing that in his own household, he faced a strikingly similar plight. His own siblings frequently persecuted them for being children born to a concubine, and since his mother had passed, there was no one left to protect them. The princess seemed genuinely interested in this, and Belle suggested she might feel the same way, and could confide freely in him if she felt comfortable enough. But she still refused to depend on anyone, much less on someone times like him, asterisk. The boy truly didn't know her full situation, so assuming he understood, anything at all was disrespectful. Along the road outside the city walls, unseen eyes watched them. Night finally descended upon them. They had reached their destination in a single day, just as planned, but for the princess, it had been an utterly exhausting journey. The gates swung open, and she was formally received. Only, she didn't know who this young man was. His name was Peter, one of the kingdom's esteemed knights, and he declared they were delighted to finally welcome her. Belle had heard of Peter before, but his name utterly escaped him at that moment, and he found it utterly strange they were received outside the city. Those who had prepared the ambush were now poised to act, while the princesses and their retinue remained outside. The boy noticed that there were many guards, but it still felt incredibly suspicious. Suddenly, a dagger flew toward them. Belle knew the princess would be an easy target out here, outside the castle walls. He swiftly reacted, shielding her with his mighty divine armament. Both she and her guards were instantly jolted, caught off guard. An enemy attack had begun, and the princess was their prime target. A flurry of daggers rained down, launched straight at her. With so many, this could spell absolute disaster for them all. Peter, too, stood ready, poised and prepared to spring into action. His incredible sword skills allowed him to shield the princess completely. He absolutely would not permit a single hair on her head to be harmed. Witnessing the knight's formidable capabilities, her eyes widened. Belle instantly surmised he must possess a formidable level B power. The assassins, their plan thwarted, were forced to make a hasty retreat. Their surprise ambush, it seemed, had utterly failed to complete its deadly task. He furiously commanded his knights to pursue those fleeing scoundrels. Meanwhile, the princess was to be swiftly escorted away from the castle's walls. Belle lingered outside, watching as the princess was whisked far away. She glanced back over her shoulder, a deep apprehension clouding her features. Inside, they reassured her, declaring she was now absolutely safe. Yet, the princess defiantly declared she was more than capable of defending herself. Just as the knight vowed he would protect her with his very life, his throat was brutally, horrifyingly slit. The princess, completely oblivious to the stealthy attack, recoiled in terror. The horrifying architect of this deed was none other than Peter himself. Now, she realized the true, horrifying danger lurked right beside her. He merely glanced at the fallen guard, who had just tragically lost his life. That valiant sacrifice had been utterly, completely in vain. The princess now stood utterly bewildered, unsure of what fresh horror awaited. Peter chillingly informed her that her life would end in mere moments. Despite her earlier boasts, the princess was now utterly defenseless. This proud princess was now truly and utterly defenseless. The twisted knight began his slow, terrifying approach towards her. She was paralyzed by terror, utterly unable to summon her divine armament. Peter then revealed his true, degenerate self. A sinister smirk on his face. A truly horrifying, chilling smile stretched across his twisted features. The princess, now desperately needed someone, anyone, to save her. Suddenly, the room's window was violently, explosively shattered. Peter reeled back, utterly taken aback by the sudden, shocking intrusion. One of his men was instantly eliminated, and the very boy, responsible for the escort, was the one who did it. Of all possible people to act, the princess had not times expected this very boy. He simply apologized for his belated, yet dramatic, arrival. The boy finally stepped down from the shattered window, his gaze fixed on the princess. He calmly informed her that, from this very moment forward, this crucial task was now entirely his responsibility. Peter, meanwhile, had strategically assumed that the guards would fall for the diversion outside. He never believed this mere boy would be capable of defeating him. And finally, the protagonist remembered exactly who this mysterious person was, but Peter was left utterly, profoundly confused. His true name was none other than von Rigel. This revelation utterly stunned the knight. He'd never imagined the child possessed such forbidden knowledge, specifically that his divine armament formed 2 unique combinations, each empowered by 3 thunder dice. Until now, he'd single-handedly eliminated formidable counts, even slaying Marcus himself. Deeply impressed by the child, he demanded to know how he'd uncovered such secrets. In his past life, he was the very individual who had delivered justice to him, which is precisely why he knew every single detail. The boy never imagined he would target the princess like this, but now his fate was sealed, and he wouldn't escape it. Despite being a mere child, Peter felt an unnerving sense of intimidation. Still, he acknowledged this was a truly intriguing turn of events. Even if the child had somehow figured him out, there was no way he could defeat a level B paladin. Indeed, this battle seemed an insurmountable challenge. For him asterisk. But if his opponent was Peter, he wouldn't face a single shred of difficulty. Incensed by the protagonist's sheer audacity, Peter vowed to make him regret every single word. The boy already knew Peter would begin by unleashing his weapons, and true to form, a deadly set of daggers flew. But the boy effortlessly dodged every single one, already anticipating his opponent's impending surprise attack. A swift, diagonal slash with his right hand. Peter was flabbergasted. He'd missed every single attack. Yet, the protagonist had already foreseen Peter would try to ambush him from behind. His hand was already poised to summon his divine armament, and with a flash of his sword, he expertly blocked the surprise attack. He knew every single move. Peter couldn't fathom how this piece of human filth could possibly match his speed. Bell declared he could finish him off at any moment, so if he valued his life, he'd better surrender immediately. But his opponent, overcome with a deep, burning rage, feeling utterly underestimated, warned he'd tear that brat into tiny pieces. Blinded by fury, his attacks grew even more predictable. That was his fatal weakness. Driven by rage, he unleashed a barrage of strikes, but not a single one was able to reach the child. The princess was absolutely awestruck by his combat skills. Despite his diminutive size, he was effortlessly battling an assassin as if it were child's play. He completely shut down every single one of those attacks. The princess suddenly realized she had been talking way too much. The ring on her finger pulsed with a sudden glow, and the protagonist, now utterly out of patience, declared he would put an end to this madness once and for all. His initial strike against his opponent landed with devastating effect. Peter was wounded. He needed a radical new strategy, and fast. He chillingly realized his every move was being perfectly read. Everything was unfolding exactly as his boss had gravely warned. That boy might possess an extraordinary, unparalleled talent, or there's something more to him, so he absolutely couldn't be careless. Confronted with this challenge, he decided to unleash his ultimate trump card. Our protagonist, however, was already acutely aware of this. He would summon his ability, an impenetrable, shimmering barrier of light. And he boldly declared that this was no problem for him at all. He confidently knew he would effortlessly overcome this challenge. Peter scoffed, convinced the boy was merely being wildly arrogant. So, with a grim smirk, he began to open that tiny vial. Even anticipating its contents, our protagonist felt a surge of worry. Those, chillingly, were the legendary Tears of the Dragon King. After dashing them to the ground, it seemed as if he had just used some potent, forbidden kind of stimulant. It was a rare artifact that dramatically multiplied the user's mana for a terrifyingly brief, yet impactful period of time. Peter vowed he would make the child regret his lack of caution. He hurled his daggers, but this time, the attack felt entirely different. They were noticeably, shockingly, much more powerful than before, and the boy absolutely needed to be careful. Immediately. Because now, he was completely surrounded by a deadly ring of blades. They hung suspended in the air, perfectly encircling his position. Peter believed his long-awaited victory would finally be sealed, because the boy was utterly imprisoned, with no escape. Inside an unyielding barrier of light, he felt his body abruptly lifted into the air by an unseen magnetic force. The princess, her heart pounding, grew deeply worried for her bodyguard. He desperately had to use his shield to try and break free. Channeling the immense power of his shield, he attempted to completely obliterate the barrier before him. But the explosive wind his weapon produced wasn't strong enough. Peter, however, was far from done demonstrating his abilities. His daggers began to glow even brighter, crackling with electric radiance. A surge of raw energy coursed violently through the entire barrier. Inside it, the boy writhed and screamed in pure agony. Peter declared he would make this stage swift and decisive. Almost losing consciousness, the boy realized he could not endure this. But just as he was weakened and nearly defeated, arrows suddenly began to fly across the room, precisely aimed at the daggers. This barrage caused the deadly barrier to be utterly destroyed. Only then did Peter finally grasp what was truly happening. The princess had incredibly managed to activate her divine armament. That paladin was risking his life to save her. You cannot remain afraid forever. Her intervention only fueled Peter's rage even more. He lunged viciously at his victim, determined to finish the job. And now, the princess was utterly overtaken by a wave of fear. But the protagonist only needed that small, crucial amount of help. Finally, the assassin instantly knew he was in deep, deep trouble. A deep, devastating blow slammed into his body. It was enough to incapacitate him completely. Bell had won that duel. His opponent's body collapsed to the ground, utterly motionless. Once he recovered, his first thought was to ask if the princess was hurt. With a sad expression in her eyes, she said nothing to him. Instead, she approached the boy, tenderly touching his face. She told him he was the only one injured in that room, apologizing profusely. She said he'd been involuntarily caught up in the succession conflict, but the boy quickly assured her it was no problem. In fact, the princess was exactly as strong as she had claimed to be, to which she humbly replied that she wasn't as strong as her bodyguard. Very grateful for his help, her appreciation was clear. She told him that if he ever needed it, she would stand up for him. Kneeling, the boy humbly expressed his immense gratitude for the princess's help. She looked at him with an expression of profound admiration. Removing the ring from her finger with careful intent, she wished for him to keep the small, precious artifact as a token of her profound gratitude and burgeoning friendship. Bell knew exactly what that artifact was. That was no ordinary ring. Finally, the mission had been completed without casualties. It was then received by the Duke, who listened intently to everything that had transpired during the princess's escort. Bell stated that he had successfully completed the task, but the Duke noticed there was something more to it. On one of the boy's fingers was the fabled Ring of Solomon. It had been given to him by the princess, as a powerful sign of her trust in him. This was an incredibly valuable artifact, indeed. One of the royal family's most prized treasures, a potent source of mana. It was unbelievable that the boy had obtained such a formidable artifact. He might be even more impressive than the Duke had ever imagined. Realizing this, he could not hide his growing satisfaction. He informed the boy that he would enlist him in Athens immediately. He had not expected to receive such monumental news, because that was an elite academy, specifically for paladins. Its access was strictly exclusive to noble families. Most members of his family were educated by private tutors. Tradition dictated that only potential successors of the family attended the academy. This could only mean he was now in the race to become the heir. The Duke ordered him to continue training diligently until he was notified about the start of his classes. But the boy still had something more to say, and his father wanted to know what it was. Standing before him, he remained firm and resolute, because he had a request to make. Now the doors opened. He was already outside the hall with his sister, who was absolutely overjoyed. She simply cannot believe that this is her new room. Her bed is now much more comfortable. It was the Duke himself who exactly granted permission for this. He requested their move to the main house, believing it would help them earn the respect of others. The girl absolutely couldn't hide her joy. Suddenly, she noticed something peculiar about the boy's hand. There was a small, noticeable wound right on it. He explained he'd gotten injured during his last task. Learning this, she couldn't help but feel a little worried. But soon, they were back to playing, which made him feel even better. Sarah would undoubtedly be incredibly well taken care of from now on. Now, his absolute focus must shift to his future. Because in just 5 years, a devastating catastrophe will strike. His sister could, once again, find herself in grave danger. And he desperately needs to gather information to unearth who is truly responsible for it. To achieve this, he must become his family's heir. Jin's servant enters his room, ready to report something vital. He bows deeply, patiently waiting for permission to speak. But Jin remains utterly absorbed, his gaze fixed on his painting. His concentration on it is absolute and unwavering. The servant reported that the bastard brother would soon be sent to Athena Academy. He was the very first to attend since Jin himself. They should eliminate him immediately. But Jin harbored no interest in such a thing. He gently set his painting aside for a moment. He calmly stated that his brother posed absolutely no threat for now. In fact, his brother's growth would prove advantageous as well, because there was something Jin truly, profoundly enjoyed doing. His servant was utterly taken aback. Jin then revealed himself to be a true, unadulterated degenerate, one who savors crushing things times after times they've fully developed. Given that it would be done exactly as his master wished, even though his master had already given the order, he still felt. He considered this an incredibly risky strategy. The boy possessed multiple divine weapons and had already managed to defeat a level B paladin. He needed to make his move immediately, purely out of an abundance of caution, of course. Meanwhile, Bell was outside, intensely training, needing to develop his unique abilities. And it would be absolutely ideal to hone them before entering the academy. The significant problem, however, was that, to achieve this, he would have to hunt countless, formidable monsters. Then, through the gleaming reflection of his sword, he clearly saw his brother's servant rapidly approaching. He instinctively knew he needed to stay incredibly alert to this approach. The man drew closer, addressing him with an unexpected level of formality. This was something he absolutely did not expect from someone supposedly hostile. Knowing full well he was his brother's servant, Bell sharply asked what he wanted. The servant began apologizing for what had happened the other day, stating it was disrespectful to point his blade at one of the Duke's own sons. The protagonist, Bell, then, thought that perhaps this man might actually be a good person. Considering that, he simply asked him not to worry about the past incident. He warmly thanked the young boy for his kindness. Yet, he had another crucial matter he wished to discuss. With the boy still clutching his sword, the servant then inquired if he would be willing to accompany him on a monster subjugation mission, a truly unusual task. He then revealed that his master, Jin, and the other paladins had other plans in motion. Impressed by the boy's prowess, he genuinely wished to help him. This was, without a doubt, a truly baffling invitation. As the Duke's son, he was utterly unable to decline, yet he instantly recognized the pressing need for wariness. With a firm nod, he declared his acceptance of the invitation, and the man thanked him with profound gratitude, for he secretly planned to eliminate him during this task. The protagonist then inquired about their destination. It was a remote, secluded location called Ithaca. He knew exactly what kind of place that was, a detail he'd forgotten, but it was the ideal spot to utilize a special method for significantly increasing his mana. Ambrosia, a rare item, permanently increased the user's mana. The carriage then set off, heading towards the monster eradication site. Inside, the protagonist was eager to eliminate some creatures, while dreaming of the possibility of acquiring ambrosia. Yet, the chances of actually obtaining it were incredibly slim. To do so, he needed to enter a hidden dungeon, and he knew the precise location of one such dungeon, because it was destined to appear near that city called Ithaca. Since night had already fallen, they needed to find lodging. The man then relayed the necessary instructions. Their mission was to eradicate several leviathans. They had been informed that several were active in that location. These were level C monsters, and since it was already late, they would begin at dawn the next day and needed rest. The boy announced he would retire to his room. As he climbed the stairs, he was being closely watched. The man scoffed, deeming him an idiot who knew nothing. of what was truly happening. He would ensure everything looked like an unexpected accident. No matter how talented he was still just at level C. It would be incredibly easy to take him out. Once in his room, he assumed Razor must already be asleep. He summoned his shield, guiding his wind magic through the window. This allowed the artifact to be used in an unexpected way, transforming into a platform capable of swift flight. The hidden dungeon was located deep within the monster forest. He and his master had discovered it a long time ago, but its precise location remained a closely guarded secret. Finally, the boy's feet touched the ground. As his artifact shimmered and disappeared, he was certain he had located the hidden dungeon. Right before him, a tiny entrance beckons. Curiosity piqued, the boy ventures deeper inside, where he stumbles upon a massive, awe-inspiring portal. This was precisely what he'd been searching for. Hidden dungeons are easily identified by their distinct colors. Blue gates signify level A, green gates are level B, and, upon their completion, you'll earn ambrosia matching the dungeon's difficulty level. This powerful reward will undoubtedly aid his journey immensely. With steely resolve, the boy prepares to breach the gate. His mission, to conquer the dungeon's formidable boss creature. In his past life, he'd faced it at a mere level D. His master had cautioned him it was far too soon back then, and even now, it might prove a grueling challenge. But he cannot allow fear to force his retreat. He plunged his hand into the shimmering gate, passing through. A singular thought driving him: grow stronger, faster. Inside the dungeon, he was instantly engaged with the very first creature, but it hardly seemed to pose a significant challenge. He carefully observed the agile movements of the Phantom Knight as it prepared to advance and strike once again. The knight delivered swift, precise, and relentless strikes, but the boy steadfastly defended himself, holding his ground. And in that relentless flurry, he spotted a crucial opening, striking the knight precisely while it was completely unguarded. Yet, his single strike wasn't enough to fell the creature. On the contrary, the sheer force of the impact sent the boy reeling backward. He needed to switch tactics and weapons fast. Now, in his hands, he wielded the mighty hammer. With a thunderous swing, he landed another powerful blow, yet the creature astonishingly remained utterly unscathed. Physical attacks alone were clearly insufficient to breach that armor. It was time for him to devise an entirely new strategy. Wielding his sword once more, he made his blade shimmer with light. He was going to unleash magic. The enchanted strikes slammed against the armor. Even so, they failed to cause even a flicker of damage. He had never encountered a creature quite like this before, but he understood he was still merely at level C. Once again, the Phantom Knight's relentless attacks pressured him. At a distinct disadvantage, he needed to conjure another strategy. Immediately. If a creature possessed a shield, it certainly must harbor a weakness. And the boy, with a sudden spark of insight, seemed to have figured it out. A mana-coated bullet should do the trick. Now, he was infusing it with fire spit. He began to charge the powerful attack he was about to unleash. Meanwhile, the Phantom Knight relentlessly advanced in his direction, closing in. Only 2 agonizing seconds remained until it was ready. The creature was drawing closer, relentlessly closing the distance, until it was finally enraged and poised to strike him down. Then, just as the distance became perilously short, his attack fully charged. The mana-infused shot was unleashed, slamming into the armor and proving itself devastatingly effective. Its armor-shattering power was truly phenomenal. The monstrous creature crumbled, finally subdued. But the shot's sheer force also sent our hero collapsing. With the intense battle finally over, he exhaled a deep sigh of relief. A burst of pure magic was the creature's true vulnerability. It just needed to pack enough destructive punch. If you hadn't possessed a divine, legendary weapon like that, you would have been utterly doomed. This dungeon's ultimate boss must be absolutely terrifying. But that's par for the course in a hidden dungeon. Even so, obtaining rare items from these monsters was a golden opportunity. That vital potion could restore both his stamina and mana. Our hero gulped it down immediately. He needed strength to continue his relentless march, and that was exactly what he did, obliterating every creature in his path, until he finally pushed through to his ultimate destination. Behind that enormous gate must lie the strongest creature of all. He was uncertain if it would be a raging demon or a gigantic serpent, but he was about to find out. Finally, he entered the main hall. It resembled some kind of ancient arena. Then, the boy started hearing sounds. Before him, a terrifying shadow materialized, resembling a knight. His body started to shiver, and his mouth became utterly dry. The sheer pressure radiating from it was simply overwhelming, and the creature his eyes beheld was truly a harbinger of death. Its eyes glowed with an intensely fierce scarlet color. The terrifying knight slowly strode forward. This was undeniably the dungeon's ultimate boss creature. He was bracing himself to face this terrifying monster head-on. Our hero needed to stay razor-sharp and completely alert. The formidable phantom knight gazed upon its mighty sword, swiftly whirling its massive weapon into position. Certainly, a devastating attack was about to begin. In the blink of an eye, the boy needed to react, or his fight would abruptly cease. The destruction that followed was utterly overwhelming. He managed to gain a precious bit of distance, but he still had to dodge its relentless crushing blows. If he were hit by any of those attacks, it would be instant death. Once again, the creature turned toward him, forcing the boy to leap away. That was the perfect opportunity he needed to summon his sword. Now he could attack as well, finding a crucial opening. He lashed out, striking the phantom knight swiftly in the back, but its armor was far denser than he had ever expected. Once again, he would struggle to pierce through that tough steel. The boy had no time to think. He needed to stay laser-focused on his dodging. He decided to try the tried-and-true strategy that had proven effective earlier, using his devastating fire spitter. This was the best strategy he had, and this time he would charge the attack for much longer. For a full 5 seconds, he still needed just a bit more time to fully charge the attack, and as soon as it was ready, he fired it, straight at the phantom knight. Hoping this would be the winning strike, the attack hurtled straight for the creature, impacting cleanly with no defense at all. To his total surprise, it had no effect whatsoever. He then noticed a strange marking on the phantom knight's chest. That magic resistance was truly formidable. Once again, the boy found himself cornered. He was lucky his agility was enough to keep dodging. Not needing much more defense, he decided to use his shield as well. With it, he managed to block a direct attack, but that destructive power was far too dangerous. With trembling hands, he realized that something had happened. The phantom knight was changing its attack pattern this time. It was coming from above, preparing to deliver a fatal blow. Bell needed to act as fast as he could. The Black Knight's sword struck the ground, completely shattering the arena floor. Amidst the rising dust, he completely lost sight of the boy. Finally, he revealed himself, again gaining even more distance. He did not have enough mana to pierce that armor, and soon he realized that the dust had obscured his enemy. Until he saw a glow forming, his body could feel a bad omen. The creature's sword had been thrown at him. He had to use his shield's protection to avoid being finished. The blade ended up ricocheting far away, and the boy realized that the attacks had not stopped. That strike had only been a feint. The real threat was coming from behind. There was nothing he could do. His body writhed in agony from the brutal impact. He was lying on the ground before the creature, and it was still not satisfied with his enemy's life, trying to stomp him to end his suffering. Even though he was weak, Bell managed to dodge once more. He only regained his strength because he had drunk an elixir. If not for that, he would have been defeated. The problem was that he had nothing left to rely on, and the creature had retrieved its sword. Faced with the risk and the impossibility of winning, he had to gamble. The shield was the heaviest weapon he had. That gave him an interesting plan. He imagined that he could throw it at the correct speed, using wind magic. Finally, the shield had become an offensive weapon. It was now the most powerful projectile he possessed. His plans were thwarted. The phantom knight managed to dodge, something the boy had not expected, and this time, he was completely unarmed. There was nothing left to stop that blade. Completely cornered, he realized he would not be able to dodge. And now, a crucial shield was gone, leaving him exposed. He desperately needed to alter its path for any hope of survival. To the creature's shock, the shield found its mark. This bought him precious seconds to swiftly dodge the blade. Seizing this fleeting chance, the boy surged forward. This time, he'd unleash an entirely different kind of assault. Channeling the full might of his mighty hammer, he aimed to deal devastating, crushing damage. The phantom knight knew evasion was utterly impossible, and the sheer force of that impact was absolutely devastating. Immediately, the creature toppled to the ground, seemingly vanquished. Bell gasped for air, exhausted after that fierce, grueling battle. His daring shield strategy had been incredibly risky, indeed, but it had proven spectacularly, utterly effective. Now, he just needed to pierce whatever lurked within that armor. But the boy hesitated, taking far too long to act. Unbelievably, the knight was already rising once more. The battle wasn't over. Suddenly, its heavy armor plates began to shed, and the creature unveiled its terrifying, true form. A terrifying truth the boy had not yet grasped. The monster reached for a hidden latch embedded, right on the guard of its mighty sword, pulling forth what seemed to be a brand new, fearsome weapon. It was some kind of deadly lock. Its main blade had remained sheathed. Its ultimate, horrifying power had finally been revealed. The boy had never conceived that such a terrifying thing could exist, and now, he faced an entirely new, deadlier enemy to fight. The creature had suddenly gained an unbelievable burst of speed. Bell desperately struggled to keep pace with its relentless attacks, until he was violently, brutally slammed against the wall. The searing pain that surged through his body was utterly agonizing. As he hit the cold ground, all strength had drained from him, leaving him unable to fight as the creature bore down on him. His senses were blurring, flickering, almost fading away, and the dungeon boss stood ready to claim his very life. Even utterly drained, the boy fought to rise once more, knowing inaction meant his life would end, right there, right now. He could barely, agonizingly, lift his head. A lethal slash was tearing straight toward him, but somehow, it was narrowly, miraculously avoided. He was using the gauntlet. The creature's reign of luck had finally, completely run out. The monster stared, utterly bewildered, failing to understand. Its victim seemed to possess absolutely no strength left. Meanwhile, the boy, too, was summoning his own blade. For the first time in this grueling battle, he pressured his enemy, and now, the true, exhilarating fight was finally about to begin. They began exchanging a flurry of blows, both now moving with incredible speed. The fight now raged, extending throughout the entire arena. Stripped of its armor, the monster had actually grown far, far stronger. Yet, it still couldn't surpass our protagonist. Unleashing the full power of his gauntlet, though, he was certain he'd crush this conflict right here, right now. Suddenly, the colored markings on the monster's body shifted. They blazed with an ominous, fiery red glow. Our hero's blade sliced right through the creature's illusion. He instantly knew his attack had struck nothing but air, forcing him to parry a strike he'd barely even glimpsed. That fiery color shift amplified the creature's speed even further, and our protagonist found himself under immense pressure once more. He hadn't been defeated yet, not by a long shot, but he desperately needed more power to seize victory. As power surged through him, the stakes grew astronomically high. The intoxicating rush of that strength was truly overwhelming. A grotesque figure materialized in his mind. The gauntlet was cursed. To wield such might, he'd have to sacrifice his very soul. And our protagonist was teetering on the edge of making that dark pact. A mysterious aura began to engulf him, threatening his self-control. He found himself utterly helpless against such immense power. It felt as if his very essence was dissolving into nothingness. The entity hissed, reminding him he truly needed time's power now. The root of all his suffering stemmed from his own lack of strength. It was why he'd always been oppressed, after all. And because of that weakness, he'd even lost his life before. Surely, by now, he was utterly sick of being so weak. It was time for him to seize what he desired with force, craving strength. He was slowly, inexorably, losing himself. The creature saw this as the perfect chance to finish him off. But his opponent had already fully unleashed his own power. Now, he stood on utterly equal footing with the monster's might. The shockwave from their clashing blades was absolutely devastating. Only one thing propelled him now: an insatiable, burning desire for pure destruction. He no longer aimed for victory. He merely yearned to annihilate. And this creature would be the very first to fall. After that, he'd demolish anything that dared oppose him. Even teetering on the precipice of losing all control, the boy's mind flashed to his beloved sister. This memory ignited a crucial spark of self-awareness. Bell was still locked in a fierce battle with the mighty creature. He realized he absolutely could not pay this horrifying price now. Not when his beloved sister was still waiting for him. His battles weren't fueled by a desire to simply take lives. The true motivation behind his yearning for strength was the desperate need to protect his precious sister. And just like that, he managed to seize back control of himself. It was time for that creature to yield the power it wielded. The incredible power of Aegis was truly formidable. He effortlessly pushed the monstrous dungeon boss reeling backward. The entity tried to tempt him further. He only needed to ask, and it would bestow upon him its immense power, provided he offered his very soul as payment. Yet, torn by an intense inner conflict, the boy still wavered, then decided to attack Mendelas. And the creature charged forward, meeting him in kind. Both warriors poised themselves for devastating blows, only to plunge back into furious, lightning-fast combat. The creature tried to surprise him with a swift monoblast, but its speed was, once again, utterly surpassed. The boy deftly disarmed the creature, forcing one of its arms to tear from its very body. That would make it impossible for the creature to continue fighting, and the protagonist finally sees the crucial opening he needed, slashing the creature clean in two. At last, it seemed the monster had been completely subdued. The victor of that brutal battle was Bell, still feeling power surge through his body as he observed the creature's form, which, now devoid of life, began to swiftly disintegrate. That grueling challenge had finally reached its conclusion, and now he could rid himself of that cursed gauntlet. That enemy had been far too powerful. The boy had almost lost all control of himself. He needed to avoid using that gauntlet as much as possible. Before him, a small, shimmering vial had appeared. It was the item he had been searching for: ambrosia. If he drank the contents of that vial, he would command as much mana as a level B paladin, allowing him to fully use his divine armament abilities. The truth was, he had never seen a vial of ambrosia before, and he was more than a little concerned. But he knew he needed to drink it if he wanted a better future. At first, he felt absolutely no change at all. After a while, he began to feel his mana increasing significantly. It was incredible. He had reached level B instantly, but after the power came the pain, so intense that the boy almost felt incapable of resisting. His chest ached, and at the same time, he felt as if his body was burning. The chief upon his waist began to glow intensely. Not knowing what was happening, he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Now, he was lying in the center of a magical formation. Waking up, still very startled, he had no idea what place this was. It was as if he had been teleported to another dimension. A man welcomed him to this place, stating he had finally woken up. That was his mentor, and it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Even with his face hidden under a hood, the boy recognized him. There was no doubt that this was his master. Other people were also present in that place. A girl carried a hammer, and a concealed man was the bearer of the gauntlet, as well as a knight who wielded a sword. There, he was met with an incredibly warm welcome from everyone. Never in his life had he encountered something quite like this before. This, he soon learned, was the fabled Dimension of Souls. Seeing his beloved disciple once more filled the man with profound emotion. The young boy, too, was absolutely overjoyed by this unexpected reunion. His esteemed master's name was Regis. It was none other than Regis who had bestowed upon him the mighty Avalon. He, himself, was the legendary original wielder of the Achilles shield. To encounter his master so suddenly and unexpectedly was a truly gratifying revelation. Yet, despite his joy, a wave of utter confusion washed over him. How could his master remember him, given his own journey back through time? The master revealed that he had been observing his pupil from within this very space. He had borne witness to the boy's tragic death and miraculous reincarnation. Hearing this, the boy's curiosity ignited, and he pressed for details about this mysterious place. This incredible space, he learned, existed within Avalon itself. It was the sacred vault where all the divine armaments were carefully stored. And, astonishingly, it also housed the very souls of each of their legendary successors. This revelation left the boy utterly bewildered, a storm of questions brewing. He urgently asked where his former master's physical body could possibly be. Regis chuckled, replying that his body was likely somewhere in the mountains, undoubtedly enjoying a peaceful retirement. Avalon, you see, was a divine armament that formed an unbreakable, mystical bond with the souls of its bearers. However, by carrying it through the fabric of time, its bearer would lose connection to it. Yet, his consciousness remained profoundly linked to his original body. The boy immediately theorized that his return to the past must have been the work of his own armament. But the master looked doubtful, dismissing the idea, at least for now. He flatly stated that he was unaware of any armament capable of such a feat. But the boy had certainly not expected that even his omniscient master couldn't provide him with that crucial answer. Now reunited with him once again, his master warmly told him that he had done an absolutely excellent job. "Protecting your sister," he declared. "You deserve immense congratulations for that." Yet, the boy couldn't help but blush and feel a little embarrassed upon receiving such high praise. He then earnestly inquired why his master was truly there with him. Just as the master was about to begin his detailed explanation, one of the other dormant souls suddenly stirred and began to move again. He loudly declared that the two of them were simply taking far too long, and he, too, yearned for a chance to speak. His name was Raven. He was the fierce wielder of the legendary fire spitters. The master sternly warned Raven that he absolutely had not finished speaking with his beloved disciple just yet. But the boisterous man playfully asked him to be a little more flexible, quipping that he wasn't some unyielding stone golem. Before them, the boy simply watched, understanding absolutely nothing. Introducing himself to the sixth successor, Raven declared it a genuine pleasure to finally meet him. The boy remained thoughtful and paused for a brief moment, and just as he reached out to shake his hand, he abruptly realized that the man was, in fact, playing a clever joke. Indeed, that man possessed an incredibly easygoing and playful spirit. The boy couldn't quite grasp it, his confusion clear for all to see. Revan, on the other hand, found it absolutely hilarious. He scoffed, calling the sixth successor incredibly undeniably naive. The girl quickly joined their lively gathering. Charlotte pointed out the newcomer was still adapting, but the man waved it off as a harmless joke, then asked Haru for his agreement. But the man was just incredibly, painfully shy. Despite being the fourth successor, he begged them not to speak to him. Of course, the girl knew Revan absolutely adored teasing everyone. He smoothly advised her not to let herself get so agitated, joking it would ruin her beauty and give her wrinkles. Charlotte, of course, did not appreciate that comment one bit. The master tried to quell the rising argument between them, yet she utterly disliked Regis's hesitant stance. Before she could respond, she was already dealing with the comedian's usual antics. The boy found it incredibly strange to see his master like that, so incredibly light-hearted and open. It only proved his predecessors were, indeed, incredibly mighty. He'd already asked his master about them countless times before. They were all magnificent heroes who battled valiantly against evil. The man wielding the sword asked them to get straight to the point. The first successor, Adam, confirmed this meeting had a vital purpose. They had summoned the boy to this very dimension to warn him. Learning this, he swiftly questioned the topic. The sixth successor needed to learn to unleash his divine arm's full power. This revelation absolutely took him by surprise. Divine arms, when fully mastered, radiate an enormous, terrifying amount of mana. Unlocking them now, however, could be utterly fatal to his body. That's why he was feeling such incredible, agonizing pain. He must wait for his body to fully mature to unlock this immense power. But the boy has desperate needs. He believes he simply cannot stop his progress now. He needs all this power to truly be able to protect his sister. Adam recognized the boy's unwavering resolve, and now, there was only one decisive thing left to do. He decided he would absolutely crush the boy, right then and there. He never expected Adam to move with such terrifying speed. He must defend himself from that swift attack, right this instant. Only then does he horrifyingly realize Adam is already behind him. The boy reeled as the back of the sword connected with him. Adam hopes this makes him realize he's still incredibly immature. But he didn't take into account one vital thing. Account that his attack could actually be blocked. Given this, he suddenly needed to rethink his entire strategy. The boy's last few fights had made him progress an astonishing amount. Perhaps he is capable, then, of rising to the occasion. He must first be able to completely master the sword. All the successors eagerly await this pivotal moment. And the boy desperately wants to know if he's finally been accepted. Adam confirmed it. If he focuses on just one ability, he might be able to control it, granting him its true power. Our hero now has permission to unleash the B-level abilities of the legendary Caliburn sword. He'll soon unlock even more abilities when the time is right, including the formidable A-level powers. Abilities that are truly extraordinary and beyond imagination. Our hero declares he'll awaken them instantly, and Adam seems quite amused by our protagonist's bold conviction. Even the comedian throws in a wish for number 6's good fortune. They all share a collective hope that our protagonist can successfully protect his beloved little sister. Even the quiet, reserved young man watches on, silently rooting for him. They'll continuously observe his journey from the deepest shadows. Now, it's time for our hero to finally return to his physical body. He awakens inside the dungeon, the world around him a blur. He feels no pain, but a strange, new sensation now courses through him. He gazes at the sword, contemplating the immense power within it. He's absolutely eager to unleash it and subjugate the dungeon's monstrous creatures, for he already knows the truly unique ability of that legendary blade. They've reached the designated location, teeming with lurking monsters, where they needed to take a boat to proceed. And now, they're right in the middle of their carefully planned journey. The young man warns that colossal leviathans will soon begin appearing, very soon. So it's time to prepare for an intense battle. What he doesn't realize is that everyone around him is secretly conspiring to attack him. Even the barber is deeply entangled in this treacherous plot. Our hero starts noticing strange inconsistencies surrounding this task. Why would a formidable B-level knight be assigned to eliminate mere C-level creatures? Or why would he even need their help in the first place? It's undeniable that something sinister has been meticulously planned. Our protagonist realizes that being attacked completely by surprise would spell absolute disaster. That's why he absolutely cannot take his eyes off times for even a second. He's informed they're drawing closer and closer to their destination. Yet, the waters ahead of them remain unsettlingly calm. As he looks at the young man, he sees he has already drawn his gleaming knife. Our protagonist firmly grips the oil, then deliberately makes a cut on his own arm. He calmly states that they need to attract the creatures first, on his terms. For this, he boldly uses his own crimson blood as irresistible bait. That alone would be enough to send the creatures into an absolute frenzy. Just as he predicted, it doesn't take long for the first horrifying creature to appear. And right along with it, several more terrifying beasts emerge. A much greater number than anyone had possibly expected. Considering these are supposed to be mere sea-level sea creatures, our protagonist suggests they split up, with some of them guarding the boat. But he couldn't possibly allow the boy to remain alone. Highly suspicious, our hero demands to know his true reasons for such an insistence. Finally, the young man reveals his truly malicious intent. He boldly declares that our hero will absolutely not leave this place alive. He swiftly initiates combat, launching a direct attack against our protagonist, who instantly finds his leg entangled and tied by a vicious whip. He swiftly grasped he was already caught in a tactical snare. The very person who bound him was one of the boatmen from this place. He then cast off his hood, dramatically unveiling his true face. The man still clutched the whip. And it was Spencer, someone our protagonist knew all too well. The other young man pressed them to execute their plan at once. With a surge of power, he hoisted the protagonist clean off the ground. With one leg frozen solid, this was going to be anything but pleasant. Freak was then brutally cast into the chilling depths. Spencer, however, was far from done with his assault. He channeled his power, causing the ice to expand even further. This way, it would be nearly impossible for the boy to reach the boat. Defying the very laws of physics, the ice began its terrifying descent. Their hope was clear. He would be devoured by the lurking creatures. Now, they could assume the boy had fallen, defeated in battle, leaving the ravenous monsters to ensure his escape was impossible. Our boy desperately needed to breathe, and fast. To burst back to the surface, he realized he could use his shield. This very shield was capable of generating its own powerful wind. So this wouldn't be entirely impossible after all. As the ice sank deeper, he began using magic to produce some air. Utilizing the inner chamber of his trusty shield, he miraculously managed to regain a precious gulp of air. He never imagined those two would conspire, joining forces to betray him. He had been wary of Razor's presence around him, but he hadn't known another threat was lurking there too. Now, a vast expanse of the surface, around the boat, was also frozen solid. And that wasn't even his worst issue. Numerous menacing creatures lurked, poised to unleash a deadly threat. His immediate priority was to fix the agonizing problem with his leg. With his shield, he was certain he could shatter all that binding ice. At last, he powerfully broke free from his icy prison. But his ankle was badly injured in the struggle. It must have happened the moment that whip lashed against his skin. The lurking creatures instantly sensed his fresh, flowing blood. Without a moment's hesitation, he summoned forth his mighty sword. He was clearly at a numerical disadvantage here, but this daunting experience would be an excellent training opportunity. This was his very first major challenge since his reincarnation, and now, he could finally unleash his newly acquired, potent ability. His first target was a ferocious, lunging creature. His sword erupted, glowing with an intense, radiant light. A searing, projected energy blast instantly shot toward the creature. Then, several other dazzling swords of light materialized in the water, swiftly eliminating every single hostile presence. It had been ages since he last unleashed this incredible power. With a mighty roar, he summoned the legendary Starblade formation. It's time for him to finally enjoy the hunt. Several more terrifying creatures surged, rushing straight toward him, but the radiant swords of light swiftly intercepted every approaching foe. They're charging headfirst into the creatures. Behold, this is the Caliburn sword's true ability it summons. A barrage of luminous, flying swords, each as sharp and deadly as the original. Soon, every single creature on the surface will be utterly annihilated. Yet, even with that, things are anything but easy here. They must reduce these relentless creatures to absolute dust, and they're using the treacherous frozen surface for crucial support. It's been a tense 5 minutes since everything went down. They're convinced that boy must have already departed from the land of the living. Good riddance. Spencer is utterly impressed by Razor's mind-blowing cognitive ability. That plan was nothing short of brilliant. On top of that, he can defeat all those creatures with shocking ease. Razor confirms he's operating on a completely different level. It's a good thing that boy stays on his side, or he might perish like one of those creatures. But he believes he can still be useful, somehow. Unbeknownst to him, the ice beneath his feet began to crack. The ominous cracks grew, and he leaned in to investigate, only to be suddenly attacked. What? The other young man was absolutely astonished by that. Something massive had just happened underwater. A gigantic hole had ripped open in the middle of the ice. This is definitely disastrous, an utter nightmare, because a colossal creature appeared, ready to feast on them. A menacing tentacle shot out from the water. He needs to be swift to avoid being caught by its grasp. That creature is a formidable B-level threat. It demands several paladins of the same level just to be subdued. If he's not cautious enough, he will absolutely lose his life. As if that weren't enough, the creature has even more tricks up its monstrous sleeve. It's firing a barrage of projectiles directly at him. But the knight, incredibly, managed to dodge them all. Now, he needs to deal with those approaching tentacles. The young man is sure, if he's caught by them, he'll also lose his life. The faster he solves this problem, the greater his chance of survival. His divine armament allows him to channel raw mana through his weapons, releasing that energy with every strike. And since it functions simply, his energy discharges are unbelievably powerful. He's confident he can subdue this creature with a single, decisive blow. But the creature is far smarter than he ever imagined. The knight finally managed to deliver his most powerful attack, striking that dangerous monster directly. But that was not the result he was expecting, because the creature had blocked the attack by using another monster's body as a shield. That only makes the situation even more complicated for him. With his enemy now absolutely furious, his life hangs by a very thin thread. He had times to retreat to the boat's relative safety. With their icy platform utterly shattered, he has no solid ground to approach the monstrous creature. And now, he has to contend with the other horrors lurking in the water, as they relentlessly leap onto the boat, absolutely determined to annihilate every single human on board. This sudden assault demands his undivided attention, leaving him oblivious to the massive tentacle lunging his way. It brutally smashes directly into his face. His weapons simply weren't designed to handle such a multitude of foes. What's more, he utterly lacks any strategic environmental advantage. He can't simply abandon the boat now. He glances outside, watching as the monsters continue to swarm. The longer they stay, the riskier it becomes to remain in this deadly place. But far more astonishing than the monsters themselves is the sudden, electrifying sight of our protagonist emerging from the water. That boy was meant to have perished long ago, but now Geki has appeared. Soaring high, his shield annihilating even more monsters, the protagonist instantly observed the deceiver's rather interesting predicament. All he truly wanted to know was how the boy had possibly survived. Even after being so cruelly deceived, he surprisingly offers to help them out of this dire situation. But Razor scoffs, completely disbelieving that the boy is capable of any real help. That massive creature is a formidable B-level monster, after all. There's absolutely nothing he could possibly do against it, but our boy has a spectacular surprise ready to unleash. The closer he approaches, the more tentacles erupt and lash out. But the protagonist is far from unprepared for this onslaught. He's still actively wielding Caliburn's incredible abilities. His blades brilliantly intercept every single tentacle, and seeing it all, Razor simply cannot believe it. He has truly perfected the unique abilities of his weapon. Those abilities must be incredibly difficult to master, Bell had warned, and that he would slice up that monster, turning it into fish food. The colossal creature prepares to unleash another volley of attacks, launching powerful water blasts at the boy, who doesn't even flinch for a second. That devastating attack could completely obliterate the entire boat, but our hero, Bell, is ready to show that creature exactly what he has in store. He completely transforms the formation of his glowing light blades, expertly merging them all back into his original, primary blade. All those swords fuse, powerfully coalescing into a single, magnificent lightsaber, now capable of unleashing a devastating, concentrated energy beam. The creature's attack violently collides with the boy's explosive counterattack, but his burning determination to win is infinitely greater. His potent attack effortlessly pierces directly through the monster's colossal body. What's more, he soared times over it as his blade continued to slice deeper. Finally, The terrifying creature has been decisively subdued. That devastating attack left it utterly incapacitated. With its body ripped clean in half, it seems utterly impossible that the boy could have pulled off such an incredible feat. Back on the boat, he declared Spencer would be next. Spencer must pay for his earlier heinous actions. This boy will undoubtedly become a massive headache for Jin. So he thought, even after witnessing that shocking display of strength, he's still dead set on eliminating the boy right here. He sneered, warning that a mere bastard could never defeat a B-level paladin. As he closes in, the boy finds it utterly shocking that this paladin still clings to the hope of victory. After all, he just used Spencer as a devastating surprise attack. He's confident he's struck deep terror into his opponent's heart. The two formidable knights lock eyes, sizing each other up for a moment, until they simultaneously decide to unleash their furious attacks. The deafening clash between their mighty weapons erupts at last. Initially, it doesn't appear the boy is feeling any pressure, until Razor brutally forces the stark difference in their physical strength glaringly apparent, sending the boy flying far away. Indeed, one among them possesses vastly superior physical might. He believes that this alone will be enough to seal the fate of this battle, but our protagonist can already tap into the true abilities of his sword, unleashing one of his dazzling light blades directly toward him. Knowing their lethal capabilities, he instantly felt a surge of dread. As it's just one blade, defending against this attack shouldn't be too hard. Against the attack, he thinks, but it was all a cunning trap, set to ambush him in his blind spot. Razor, too, can wield the incredible abilities of his divine armament, utterly annihilating the incoming light blade. Its ethereal image slowly fades away, and he firmly believes that the boy will never be able to land a single hit on his formidable body. Thus far, the intense duel between them appears surprisingly balanced. It certainly won't be easy to defeat a powerful B-level paladin. His precious mana is draining at an alarming rate, all due to those abilities, which means his only remaining option is that final, powerful sword. As a seasoned knight, he quickly deduces the boy cannot possibly keep using that ability, knowing full well it comes at a heavy cost. Ruthlessly advancing, he's determined to bring this fight to a swift end. His initial attack didn't connect with the boy as he had intended, but the brutal second strike in the combo landed a direct hit. His still fragile and underdeveloped body simply isn't capable of withstanding that impact. The massive physical strength difference between them is proving to be a colossal advantage. He could unleash ages to end this, but he fears being irrevocably trapped within its suffocating darkness. As close combat proved too perilous, he swiftly swapped his weapon, unleashing a volley of rapid shots straight at his foe. Yet, his nimble opponent deftly managed to dodge every single one. That was precisely the opening the boy had been desperately waiting to. Catching him off guard with a sudden strike, he quickly noticed the boy's strategy. He realized it completely lacked the agility needed to be effective. It failed to account for the unexpected, leaving him vulnerable. Harnessing the momentum from those shots, he propelled himself even closer, ensuring his next strike would reach its target with blinding speed. He nearly severed his enemy's head clean off, but instead, he only fueled his rage even further, watching his opponent become utterly enraged. He smirked, realizing his strategy was working perfectly. Then, he was caught completely off guard by the last light blade, which swiftly pierced through his back. That was an unexpected twist he absolutely did not anticipate. With a wound of that magnitude, there's no way he could possibly continue fighting. Realizing this, his understanding of the boy's strategy had been completely, utterly wrong. Knowing his opponent couldn't possibly fight anymore, he calmly approached him. He warned him this was finally over. He strongly recommended he abandon any thought of trying to attack him again. But the concept of giving up simply didn't apply to him. He believed the boy posed a grave threat to the future of his master, Jin. That's why the boy absolutely must be defeated, here and now. Faced with this unwavering stance, he demanded to know why such unwavering loyalty to his brother. That's when he delved deep into the memories of his past. In a brutal battle, he had already been critically weakened, with no strength left in his body to even keep walking. That was truly as far as he could go. A man then approached him, stopping right in front of his completely obliterated body. He imagined the man on the ground must be the infamous mercenary, responsible for all those terrible crimes. With what little strength he had left, he strained to look at this person. The young man was opening a small, ornate flask, pouring its mysterious contents over the badly injured man. He declared that this was his lucky day, because from that very moment, he would become his master. That is the profound reason for his loyalty. He had been accepted by Jin, and he absolutely must repay all that kindness, no matter what might happen to his own life. Completely destroying the light blade the boy had summoned, what remained of it was contemptuously thrown to the ground. Bell realized his enemy had already decided his fate. He thought he was just a bandit, but he respected his word like a true knight. Now, they would fight with every ounce of their power. The young man still burned with furious anger, completely prepared to continue the duel. But Bell had seen that powerful ability once before. It was incredibly strong, but required time to be ready. That's why Bell would attack first. The boy, however, had already taken the offensive, and as soon as he approached, he was instantly surprised by a swift movement, being powerfully struck by his opponent's knee. He realized, too late, he'd fallen for a cunning feint. Now, on the brink of defeat, he swiftly regained his footing. But he snarled, a defiant warning. This was far from over. For he'd secretly held back one final, desperate chance. A tiny, forgotten fragment of his sword had miraculously endured, and with a lightning-fast strike, it tore across his foe's back. That single, decisive blow left his opponent utterly incapacitated. He'd believed all swords were shattered, but oh, what a grave shame. He was so terribly wrong about that assumption. The boy had merely made it seem like the blades were destroyed, a masterful deception that was the very core of his victory strategy. It was unsettling. The boy fought with a veteran's battle experience, a baffling advantage that proved incredibly challenging to face. Without his own hidden trump card, he surely would have lost. Yet, he triumphed, defeating Razor, a formidable B-level paladin, undeniable proof of his strength, growing exactly as planned. Meanwhile, the ship pressed on, journeying towards the continent, finally reaching its destination, the bustling city. Inside, Stella tirelessly searched for her beloved brother, but he was nowhere in sight. Her search continued frantically around the castle. The boy seemed to have vanished, nowhere to be found. Even so, she pressed on, her desperate search never stopping, until a gnawing fear set in. What if he hadn't returned yet? The issue was, the mission he'd embarked upon to complete should have been finished days ago. She noticed a set of doors slightly ajar. It was the library. A flicker of hope ignited. Could her brother be inside? With a newfound resolve, the girl hurried inside, determined to find him. Instead, she was met with a chilling, unexpected encounter. Jin stopped dead in front of her, his sudden presence leaving her frozen. Startled and unnerved, despite being siblings, his aura was menacing, petrified by the situation. Yet she knew she had to greet him. But when she tried to speak, her voice caught, words failing her. All while under the unwavering scrutiny of his menacing gaze, a gaze capable of paralyzing her very soul with fear. Jin, passing by, uttered coldly that she was utterly worthless. Hesitantly, she staggered back a few steps, her heart pounding, until she suddenly bumped hard into something solid. Spinning around, she saw him, her brother, who had found her. He demanded to know what Jin wanted with Sarah, but still, Jin didn't utter a single word in reply. Finally, the girl could rejoice, her brother safe and found. It was a tremendous relief to know he had returned safely. Yet, her joy was tinged with worry. He was injured once again. He explained he'd faced a fierce monster this time, a powerful foe, a B-level paladin, none other than Razor himself. Even after hearing that, Jin remained utterly unfazed, showing no reaction. Bell interjected, warning that the young man had failed his trap. Jin simply scoffed, declaring no one cared about such trivialities, because they were nothing but small pebbles in his grand path. And the same went for that foolish girl they called his sister. Now, he would simply continue on his way, with no time to waste on mere pebbles. Yet, there was still something the protagonist urgently wanted to declare. He warned his brother that he would be the one to succeed the Duke. Why? Because Jin was utterly incapable of protecting their family. Jin immediately whirled around after hearing such a declaration. He fixed his gaze upon the boy, menacing and sharp, revealing his intense and utterly hostile presence to all. They were instantly engulfed by his powerful, suffocating aura. It was truly something magnificent, overwhelming, and deeply impressive. But even that wasn't enough to make Bell hesitate, not one bit. Jin, finding this all quite interesting, allowed a faint smile to grace his lips. Then, he began to laugh even louder, a booming, echoing sound. Perhaps it might be interesting to look at the pebbles from time to time. As he then made his departure from the library, he issued a final warning to his brother. You may try to finish me off whenever your heart desires. Sarah was deeply worried after witnessing that tense conversation, but she was quickly reassured by the protagonist's calm demeanor, who knew just how frightening that moment must have been. The pressure radiating from Jin was truly surreal. Her brother was, without a doubt, truly extraordinary. In terms of raw strength, there was a colossal difference between them. To even hope to defeat him, Belle needed to reach an unimaginable level before graduating from the academy. After that dramatic incident, a few short days have now passed. Belle stood, bags packed, utterly ready to depart. The Duke was already waiting, ready for his son's journey, noticing that the boy was also completely and meticulously prepared. Belle sincerely thanked his father for all the unwavering support he'd received. The academy strictly requires students to be accompanied by bodyguards. The Duke declared he would send a B-level paladin to escort him. The paladin affirmed he would be entirely at the boy's service. Faced with this, Belle still wanted to ask something of the Duke. The Duke, granting permission, allowed the boy to speak his mind. But before he could even utter a word, he was utterly surprised. For his sister, Sarah, had suddenly appeared, also fully packed and completely ready to go. She apologized, a bit flustered, for being late. Carrying her suitcase over to the boy, Belle's request quickly formed. He wished for his sister to be allowed to accompany him on this journey. The Duke, intrigued, also wanted to know the boy's motivation. Belle didn't want to leave her alone. He wanted them to stay together, but the Duke could not allow it. The academy only permitted bodyguards, and Belle was certainly not going there to play games. Sarah desperately tried to ask her father to reconsider, but he sternly warned the girl not to make that request again. So, to brilliantly solve the problem, Belle asked that she be his bodyguard, because when he's by her side, he is absolutely certain that he can accomplish anything, even powerful enough to defeat an A-level paladin. The Duke pondered for a brief, intriguing moment, finding the boy's bold statement rather amusing. He simply told the boy he could do as he pleased. With that, their carriage set off, heading straight for the academy. Sarah, completely mesmerized, was captivated by all the new sights. At last, the two siblings finally arrived at their grand destination. The academy building was absolutely magnificent, a sight to behold. The young girl beamed, so proud of her brother's incredible achievement. This was an esteemed institution, exclusively for the noble elite. While he attended class, he asked his sister to study back in their room, but first, they needed to get settled in right away. However, they immediately stumbled upon several students engaged in combat. It was merely a friendly sparring match between fellow students. A fantastic opportunity to observe and learn, Sarah found herself impressed. Indeed, they all appeared incredibly strong. Yet, the protagonist keenly noticed they still seemed to be at D level. However, one particular boy among them truly stood out significantly, immediately catching the protagonist's discerning eye. But alas, he was only at C level. He certainly wouldn't be able to surpass our protagonist. Soon, only two fierce students remained locked in their intense battle, and the boy was convinced this was his day to claim glorious victory. He charged at his opponent, utterly determined to finally defeat him. But the opposing young man remained utterly unintimidated. He calmly allowed the attack to come dangerously, terrifyingly close. Even Sarah gasped, genuinely worried for his safety. His lightning-fast response was even more surprising, as he caught his enemy completely off guard. All it took was a single, devastating strike. It didn't even seem like he needed to use a divine weapon. He was definitely at B level, perhaps even stronger than our protagonist. Even the other students watched, utterly impressed by the shocking outcome. The representative of Roth Windsor was simply incredible. That realization left the protagonist deeply, profoundly alarmed, because he knew they were a fierce rival family, their historical, sworn arch-enemies. And because of that, *He was their enemy, and so were his sisters. The grand admission ceremony at the academy was finally about to begin. They were congratulating all the bright new students admitted to their first year. This auspicious event was being led by the esteemed student council president, and he expressed his hope that all these freshmen would prove themselves to be exceptionally strong individuals. Albert, currently a third-year student, hailed from a family that had already produced many renowned paladins. Though they'd never met in his past life, he knew that by 18, Albert had already reached S level. He immediately began to wonder if He had been involved in that mysterious incident. It was entirely possible he was one of those responsible. Whispers filled the air, all about the boy's intimidating presence. Already at B level, it seemed even more students in the student council were operating at that very same impressive tier. The council was formed exclusively by those who'd seized top 4 positions. At the prestigious martial arts tournament, with the coveted president title granted only to the event's champion, Albert was undeniably a powerhouse, but our protagonist still wasn't sure if this was his tormentor. To prevent any future attacks of this kind, he needed to unleash his full strength and show his enemies his true power. The academy didn't hold elections for the council. Students were selected purely on their martial prowess, and our protagonist yearned to participate as well, so he could finally face Albert and defeat him in combat. Inside the classroom, he patiently waited for the professor. Then, someone approached, looking to sit beside him. He asked if anyone was already seated there. Bell confirmed the seat was free and invited him to sit. That boy's name was Line Flex Seal, and he hoped they would share many enjoyable years at the academy. But something about him instantly caught our protagonist's attention. That boy's surname was strikingly familiar. Seeing our protagonist's reaction, he grew a little curious. He brushed it off as nothing, but inwardly, he was quite surprised. A few years from now, he would eradicate several nobles as part of a personal vendetta, earning him the formidable title of the Knight of Retribution. Even though today, he was only a fraction of the legend he'd become. Line asked for the protagonist's name. He was about to answer, then remembered that his father had strongly advised him not to reveal his noble house. Many might help him solely because of his surname, which would hinder his true purpose at the academy. He needed to prove his worth through his own strength and effort. The name our protagonist invented was Lebel Slayer. He would hide his identity until he finally defeated Albert. Hearing that surname, Line assumed he also belonged to the commoner class. The insignia on their uniforms clearly showed their class. Commoners wore a circle, while nobles used a star. Bell confirmed he was a commoner too, while Line came from a family of commoners. In that school, many hailed from noble families. Commoners were the minority. Realizing they were of the same class, he hoped they could get along well. It was quite interesting for our protagonist to befriend a promising knight. Line could prove to be a powerful ally. In his past life, he had never made friends, so this was actually a bit pleasant. A boy was approaching them as he already knew Line. It seemed like he had come there just to bother him. This was Roger. He hadn't expected to be in the same class as his friend from his hometown. Everyone knew he was the son of a count and was already at D level. He wanted to know why that little boy was there too. He had taken the admission exam just like everyone else. Roger ended up congratulating him for that. But Lime seemed quite uncomfortable. Getting closer, he warned that Athena was not a place for him as he was just a commoner, so it would be better if he left soon. The boy became quite uneasy, and Roger warned that slaves should obey their masters, and that he could crush someone of his status with just his words. Bell intervened, stating that that was enough. Line started to feel anxious for the new friend he had made. Roger also wanted to know who this boy was. Immediately noticing that he was also a commoner, looking at him with all the disdain he had, Belt told the boy to leave regardless of whether he was a commoner or not. Roger decided he would just let him go. Making a sudden movement toward the boy, he delivered a kick to Lime. Bell ended up worrying about his new friend. Roger was enjoying the situation. Bell said that he was just a bastard, who shouldn't even consider himself a paladin since you belong to the nobility. You should care about the commoners. But he said that the poor only existed to be exploited by the nobles. Bell warned that his understanding was very limited. A county could fall just as quickly as a commoner. Roger seemed like he was about to use magic, asking if the boy wanted to fight him. Now he had his divine weapon in his hands. Seeing that conflict was inevitable, he asked Lime to step back. He was about to summon his divine armament as well. Roger was quite intrigued by that, while the protagonist warned that he would force some common sense into his head. Seeing that sheath, he began to despise him even more. It must be nothing more than a nobody for having such a useless divine weapon, one that couldn't even crush a fly. And the protagonist warned that if that were the case, then Roger must be less than a fly. He didn't like being looked down upon by commoners and decided that he would finish him off. Our protagonist was itching to unleash his power and see if he had what it took. The entire class was suddenly buzzing, their attention fixed on the impending showdown. Roger lunged forward, completely oblivious that he was nothing more than a side character in this tale. Meanwhile, our protagonist was perfectly poised, ready to spring into action. His gaze was sharp, meticulously tracking every subtle movement of his opponent. But suddenly, a mysterious hand materialized seemingly out of thin air. It swiftly interposed itself, perfectly separating the two combatants. The mesmerizing melody from that woman's lyre somehow managed to quell the escalating conflict. The ethereal sound it produced seemed to deeply unsettle both of them. She then calmly declared that fighting was out of the question, as they were all classmates here, and she urged them to heed her every word with utmost attention. Our protagonist, Belle, was utterly bewildered, having no idea who this mysterious girl was, but she continued to play her enchanting lyre, completely undeterred. Then, she gracefully introduced herself, stating her name was Silva. She hailed from the illustrious Elfage family, a renowned house of marquises, a noble rank that significantly outranked Roger's own family. Just then, the teacher bustled into the classroom, commanding the students to quickly take their seats and prepare for the lesson. For the day's critical lesson was about to begin. For their very first task, she would rigorously evaluate each student's abilities. They were to unleash their divine armaments, ready to strike, and attack the designated target as if facing a formidable monster. Their mission, to aim squarely at those imposing golems, and display the full extent of their hidden power. The first student confidently stepped up to showcase his abilities. He charged fiercely at the target, brandishing his gleaming sword, unleashing a powerful, decisive first strike. But the target proved unyielding. His efforts seemed to do absolutely nothing. He managed only a very superficial scratch, which instantly, the entire structure regenerated itself. A critical detail that our keen-eyed protagonist immediately noticed. Several other students followed suit, valiantly attempting to attack it. The teacher observed that the majority of students still languished at E level, as most could barely conjure even a faint trickle of elemental damage. Now, the spotlight shifted to Line, for it was his turn to demonstrate his abilities. Remarkably, that spear he wielded seemed to possess absolutely no magical power. It seemed he was the only student to receive a dismal F level in that entire evaluation. Undeterred, the boy bravely charged forward at the target, thrusting the sharp tips of his spear directly into its unyielding body. But just like many before him, he was violently flung backward. Roger sneered, declaring him nothing more than a useless boy, utterly incapable of magic. Slowly but surely, the boy began to push himself back to his feet. Roger, meanwhile, was brimming with confidence, ready to flaunt the stark difference between himself and that trash, as his divine armament blazed to life like an inferno. He attacked with an air of absolute, unwavering confidence, and the formidable blade of his scythe tore deep, embedding itself firmly in the target, leaving behind a trail of undeniable, significant destruction. Naturally, some of his classmates were utterly awestruck by his display. The teacher nodded approvingly, pleased with his D-level performance. Roger, of course, triumphantly concluded that he must be the absolute best student in the entire class. And now, the spotlight shines on the blonde girl. It's finally her moment to shine. As she strums her lyre, her powerful attack is unleashed. The sheer sonic force rattles her classmates to their core. These weren't just sound waves, they were waves of pure destruction, leaving the target utterly devastated and torn asunder. It's clear these two are leagues above everyone else in this class. Roger's politeness towards her was undeniable, showing deep respect, but only because her noble rank far surpassed his own. He merely hoped to maintain a favorable impression with such a powerful noble. Yet, she quickly stated that she'd prefer he didn't bother with such gestures. Her thoughts on the matter had long been settled. Within these academy walls, they stood as absolute equals. Noble titles meant utterly nothing in this sacred place. Roger visibly bristled, clearly bothered by her dismissal. Up next for the exam, none other than our protagonist himself. The arrogant boy, Roger, sneered, convinced this commoner would utterly fail. After all, what could he possibly do with just an empty sheath? Belle simply retorted he wouldn't be using just times a sheath as a weapon. Then, wielding Caliburn itself to perform his attack, Roger was utterly stunned. That boy has more times than one divine armament? He gaped. The blonde girl's eyes widened, and even his new friend looked completely astonished. Beyond his initial shock, Roger soon realized the weapon bore no magic, and after his first strike upon the target, he was powerfully repelled, staggering backward from the impact. Our protagonist, however, simply urged him to pay closer attention. He was about to unleash his true times attack. With a blinding, relentless barrage of lightning-fast strikes, he utterly decimated the target, leaving nothing but shattered fragments. His classmates were struck dumb, absolutely awestruck by his incredible power. Even the seasoned teacher couldn't help but look deeply impressed. The golem was cleanly sliced apart, all without a shred of magical assistance. It was purely the boy's unrivaled skill. He simply didn't need magic for that. Roger, seething, simply couldn't accept such talent from a mere commoner. Lime then rushed over to his new friend, beaming with congratulations for his feat. But our protagonist just brushed it off, calling it simple. He even told Lime he could do it too, leaving the boy utterly floored. Lime confessed he still couldn't even master basic magic. Bell reassured him, affirming that his instincts about his own potential were right. His divine armament held truly immense, untapped potential. As long as he refused to give up, he could absolutely rise to become the most powerful holy knight of all. Those incredibly encouraging words left Lime blushing beet red with embarrassment. Until suddenly, the blonde girl materialized right between the two of them. She simply had times to know just how was this boy so incredibly talented, but her sudden, close proximity visibly flustered our protagonist. Meanwhile, several other students were practically buzzing with interest. Some hadn't even been able to times his lightning-fast strikes. One of them exclaimed that his sword must surely be the most powerful divine artifact among all the freshmen. And Roger definitely overheard every single word. Terrified, the boy scrambled to correct himself instantly, proclaiming Roger's weapon to be undeniably mightier. But that only ignited an even greater fury within him. With the day's task now drawing to a close, the next lesson would be a grueling practical test. A thrilling monster hunt deep within the forest behind the school. Everyone had to be in absolute readiness. The students still burned with curiosity about that enigmatic, talented boy. Roger summoned his bodyguard, who materialized instantly. He wore a haggard expression, looking incredibly unwell and pale. Roger had secured a powerful, familiar ultimate protection, and it would be crucial for tomorrow's task. The knight inquired if he intended to unleash it during the task. The boy dismissed the thought, declaring there was no problem, and his knight stated that the young master's actions were always so incredibly courageous. Roger craved to savor the expressions of sheer terror from both the commoners and even the lower nobles, because he was going to send that proud commoner straight to absolute hell. Outside the academy, everyone was buzzing, gearing up for class. The monsters swarming there started at the lowest F level, but some more dangerous E-level beasts had also been unleashed. Their crucial mission: to hunt down these creatures. Whoever defeated the most of them would reap lavish bonus points. Roger couldn't hide his malicious grin, revealing his true colors. Finally, the practice had begun. It was time for them to unleash their full potential and prove their mettle. A determined girl fiercely wished to compete with the protagonist to see who could snatch the coveted first place. Little did she know that first place was already claimed. He needed to unleash his undeniable power to all of them. Lime desperately wanted to accompany him, since he still lacked the confidence to face battles alone yet. He granted him permission to come along, but made it crystal clear that he wouldn't go easy on him. Charging toward the forest, he commanded him to follow. It didn't take mere moments before they clashed with several creatures, but they were no real challenge for the protagonist, who was effortlessly carving down those monsters as if they were mere paper. His classmates were also fiercely engaged in the hunt. He'd already slain a whopping 15 monsters. It was so effortless, it barely counted as a warm-up. Lime was utterly awestruck by his classmates' stunning performance, but they had no time for conversation. Suddenly, one of the creatures materialized menacingly behind the boy, but he was swiftly rescued by the protagonist's heroic intervention. He needed to remain extremely vigilant. As the number of creatures had swelled far beyond expectations, Lime desperately needed to conquer his own fears. His classmates were steadily progressing, holding their own, and the creatures were being swiftly vanquished. He knew this demanded far more effort than he was currently giving. Deep within the forest's shadows, Roger continued his sinister vigil over his rivals. Burning with envy, he seethed, believing these commoners utterly arrogant. And for that, he was absolutely going to make them pay. Soon, their lives would swiftly reach a brutal end. Wielding his staff, he was about to unleash something monstrous. The protagonist's gaze sharpened, noticing the magic circle's ominous glow, immediately sparking his intrigue as, from within its depths, a terrifying creature began to emerge. This monstrous entity was clearly capable of wielding raging fire. Indeed, it was a truly dangerous salamander. Its maw was absolutely enormous, and its teeth looked lethally sharp. All the students were visibly shaken and utterly terrified by its sudden appearance. While they scattered and ran in panic, the protagonist stood his ground, unmoving. The boy simply couldn't believe such a creature had appeared, and it was already poised, ready to mercilessly attack anyone. This left the young boy utterly, completely terrified. For the second time, he had to be swiftly saved by the protagonist, who skillfully blocked the scorching flames with his trusty shield. He barked an urgent order for the boy to run away with the others. A B-level creature was absolutely not supposed to manifest in this forest, but that was irrelevant. For the protagonist, This was going to be a lot of fun. The protagonist was already unleashing his formidable abilities, sending his radiant swords of light hurtling towards the creature. They sliced clean through its tough scales. Roger had clearly not expected that this commoner could wield such unique and powerful abilities. He absolutely needed to escalate the difficulty now, and so, he called forth his knight once again. This knight was ever ready to obey Roger's every dark command. The fearsome creature was completely surrounded by the protagonist's swords of light. He found that absolutely incredible. His classmate was single-handedly pressuring such a powerful creature. It was time for this beast to vanish. The swords of light were poised, ready to deliver a fatal, crushing blow. But the knight would absolutely not allow that to happen. Sabotaging the boy's attack, he quickly realized exactly what had occurred. Another person in the forest started deliberately approaching them, stating that the protagonist's unique ability was indeed quite impressive. Presuming him to be the master of that summoned creature, he sharply asked the newcomer what he truly wanted. The knight coldly stated that he would not leave without the protagonist's head. The salamander resumed its fiery assault, launching scorching fireballs, while the knight launched his own relentless attack. The powerful attacks dramatically collided, striking each other with force, raising a huge, obscuring cloud of steam. To disperse it, he cleverly used the wind from his shield. But the cunning knight had already prepared well in advance, creating a water prison to precisely isolate each of those radiant blades. Now, they seemed utterly incapacitated. That oppressive water prison had completely sealed away his abilities. Our protagonist quickly realized he was facing a formidable B-level paladin, and he was completely surrounded by challenging, relentless opponents. Both the fiery salamander and the fierce knight continued their relentless assault. Now, he had to deftly deal with both, blocking one attack. One strike with his shield and deftly cutting the other with his sword. At his current power level, this seemed utterly beyond his capabilities. Lime was frozen, not knowing what to do. At this rate, his best friend would inevitably be defeated. Then, he spotted Roger, lurking suspiciously in the middle of the forest. Roger's presence there was undeniably suspicious. And that staff? It was Roger's family's, used for ancient summonings. Lime immediately charged towards Roger. Roger, completely caught off guard, hadn't expected the boy to find him. He furiously demanded if that familiar truly belonged to him. He screamed for Roger to stop this now, because the protagonist was in grave danger. Roger, without a second thought, viciously attacked him, barking at the weakling to stay precisely where he belonged, on the ground. It was pathetic. He was utterly unable to do anything to help anyone. He began to remember his younger days, when he was still training as a child. It was pathetic that he simply couldn't use magic, and he had been humiliated countless times by that very boy. But things absolutely couldn't continue that way. So he stood up, fueled by the protagonist's powerful words to him. That was the very first time someone had ever spoken such encouraging words to him in his life. He would not let his friend die, because he had absolutely decided to save him. Roger couldn't believe this weakling actually thought he could defeat him, because worms, after all, were just worms. Lime roared at him to shut up, declaring he wouldn't let Roger measure his worth. Roger suddenly started feeling a distinct pang of unease. He defiantly warned that he absolutely wouldn't lose, not just because the boy could use magic now. Lime coolly agreed with that statement, while the idiot's scythe also started glowing. Roger needed to finish off this trash times now asterisk. But Lime exuded tremendous confidence. His spear was able to brilliantly freeze those flames, making them disappear completely. A truly unexpected and stunning result. The real trash here, it seemed, had red hair. Roger was getting more and more utterly enraged, charging furiously and recklessly at his classmate. But Lime's spear proved to be far, far stronger, easily capable of blocking that powerful attack. Their weapons clashed violently, becoming locked in a fierce struggle. Roger simply couldn't believe what was happening before his eyes. And Lime? He knew exactly what he was doing. With shocking ease, he completely shattered the boy's divine armament, causing Roger to collapse, utterly defeated, to his knees. He was utterly unable to accept what had just happened. It was impossible. He had been defeated by an F-level paladin. It was baffling how Lime had ever trembled before such a pathetic boy, because now he felt absolutely nothing but disdain. With a cold command, he ordered him to hand over the summoning staff. Roger, defiant, questioned if he truly understood what he was doing. He declared he hailed from a great county and could utterly obliterate the boy's entire family. Yet, it seemed Roger still hadn't grasped the chilling reality of his predicament. Lime reasoned with the boy, simultaneously freezing him solid from the legs down, commanding him once more, with an unyielding voice, to surrender the staff. With his pride utterly shattered and dignity annihilated, he finally relented, agreeing to give up the item, begging only for his life to be spared, promising never to repeat his cruel acts. Again, he had been utterly defeated, humiliated beyond measure. The summoning staff had now decisively changed hands. Lime warned Roger to stay far away from him and his friend, or face truly complicated consequences. Lime finally relaxed a little, even as Roger's mind raced, plotting his next move. The chain of his weapon, deceptively, was still within reach, and suddenly, with a sinister flash, the other end of it began to glow. A treacherous sneak attack was already in progress. Roger, filled with false bravado, believed he would swiftly take down that boy. But Lime was utterly aware, effortlessly blocking that pathetic, desperate attack. It was truly pathetic that Roger had resorted to such a desperate, cowardly tactic. The summoning staff, now lying uselessly on the ground, was utterly destroyed by the boy's counter, leaving Roger completely speechless. He couldn't fathom that such a valuable item had been destroyed. Little by little, the summoned salamander began to fade, a truly unexpected outcome for that turbulent night. Immediately realizing that something dire had befallen his master, from afar, he could clearly see that his master had been subdued. So, he furiously turned his attention toward the other commoner, but he couldn't act so easily, finding himself unable to move, because he simply didn't have the luxury of being distracted. The true mastermind behind all those treacherous actions had finally been discovered. It seemed he had unequivocally aimed to take down the protagonist. It was a shame it had to come to this. In a fair fight, that knight would simply never be able to defeat him. All he could do was furiously curse the boy, firing several times at him, yet miserably missing every single shot. His situation had just spiraled into something far more complicated. Even though that knight was rated B level, he was clearly at the absolute bottom of that ranking. The protagonist swiftly struck his head with the hilt of his sword. The chasm between their abilities was simply far too immense. Bell sternly warned that he would hand him straight over to the teacher, so he had no choice but to use his last resort, immediately prostrating himself. He desperately begged for mercy, his voice trembling. It was so sudden, so unexpected, that the protagonist was momentarily caught off guard. The knight pitifully claimed he was merely following his master's direct orders. Disobeying a powerful noble was, truly, not an easy task for him. That was exactly what the knight wanted, to catch the boy off guard. Finally receiving an unexpected forgiveness for his actions, he profusely thanked him. In reality, he was plotting a wicked betrayal. Only then did the boy taunt him, revealing he was merely toying with his prey. He drew his sword, ready to strike a fatal blow. But he had already anticipated this treacherous deception. Lime rushed to his friend, his face etched with worry, asking if he was hurt. Our protagonist knew, beyond a doubt, that it was Lime's timely intervention that had averted a true disaster. The boy was simply returning the favor, and that handshake sealed their burgeoning friendship. Soon, other students arrived too, eager to express their heartfelt thanks for the incredible help. It was absolutely astounding he had defeated a B-level knight. But that wasn't the only shocking revelation from that night. That knight was none other than one of Roger's notorious allies, the Fire Salamander, directly tied to Roger's schemes. He was undeniably a truly despicable individual. And because of the chaos he had wrought, Lime was now basking in the overwhelming praise of his classmates. It seemed, after all, that he truly possessed incredible strength. Humbly, Lime bowed his head, thanking them for their kind compliments. Exactly as expected from the knight, he would undoubtedly become one day. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure had been observing everything from afar. The blonde girl appeared quite pleased with the spectacle she witnessed. She now completely understood the intricate workings of that boy's divine armament. Her secret task had finally been completed. And Roger? He would certainly pay for his despicable actions. The girl awaited them, patiently, at the very end of the corridor. She clearly had something crucial to convey to our protagonist. Gazing at her, he suddenly recalled her name, Silva. He asked what she wanted, only for her to reveal she already knew Avalon was the name of his divine armament. This immediately stunned him. She even knew it was the sacred weapon wielded by heroes of old. He had no idea how this girl knew about Avalon. Judging from the protagonist's facial expression, she was absolutely spot on. She was the very first person to truly recognize the true nature of that legendary divine armament. Her objective, it seemed, was remarkably simple. Yet, our protagonist appeared quite concerned by her statement. She clasped her hands together, holding them directly in front of him. Bowing deeply, she very politely inquired if she might be allowed to see that weapon. The boy, naturally, had not anticipated such a request. She confessed she had always admired that fabled armament, the legendary weapon of heroes. So, she desperately wanted to see it, and since it was a truly simple request, he presented her with the impressive sheath. She was utterly impressed, never imagining such a legend could be real. The protagonist, intrigued, asked how she knew about this incredible item. She explained a captivating legend had been passed down through her mother's family. It spoke of a hero possessing a wondrous sheath that held multiple weapons within. It was entirely possible that one of his ancient predecessors hailed from her own family. Lime still couldn't quite grasp the whole concept, the whole story, but he instinctively knew his friend's divine. Their gear had to be absolutely incredible. The girl was absolutely ecstatic, as one of her greatest dreams had just come true. And as a heartfelt token of appreciation, she suggested they all go on an outing together sometime soon. There was this amazing cafe in town she knew, and they absolutely had to visit it together. Lime instantly loved the idea, and the protagonist thought it would be an excellent chance to explore the city. He agreed, but with one condition. He'd bring someone along. Soon enough, the lively young group found themselves inside the cafe. Sarah was absolutely enchanted by the taste of that strawberry pie. Belle was overjoyed to see his sister enjoying it just as much. The girl genuinely hadn't expected the protagonist to have such a stunning sister. Sarah couldn't help but blush a little at the compliment. Watching her have such a blast was even more delightful for the protagonist. He, too, was having the time of his life, something utterly new to his past existence. Suddenly, a blonde girl called for everyone's undivided attention. She was about to perform a special song just for them. Now, hearing music played by a divine weapon, that certainly sounded intriguing. The girl then began to play her lyre, but the sound was, to put it mildly, simply awful. Her musical proficiency was non-existent. The girl knew perfectly well that she played terribly, but she did it purely to entertain her beloved friends. And everyone else found it utterly hilarious, cheering her on to keep playing. Pointing at Lime, she boldly declared he should sing along too. Together, the two of them were completely captivating everyone inside the cafe. What started as a joke soon blossomed into a truly unforgettable performance. These two were, without a doubt, his very first real friends in his entire life. Outside, they were all still buzzing about how much fun they just had. The girl then announced she wanted to take Sierra out to buy some new clothes. He protested, saying he couldn't possibly let his sister go alone, but his friend playfully reminded him this was a girl's thing. The protagonist looked quite deflated by the news. He only asked to be immediately informed if anything, and I mean times anything asterisk, happened, making the girl realize what an incredibly excellent brother he truly was. Sarah then asked if she had any siblings of her own. A touch of sadness in her voice, she replied that she had none. Just then, it seemed someone was actively looking for Silva, and that person's name was none other than Evelyn. He was, in fact, one of the esteemed student council members. It was certainly an unusual introduction for half-siblings, to say the least. He felt she should have been more polite, but she simply didn't see him as a brother. He had come there with a clear purpose, to make her train. Because, if her divine weapon could be perfected, then one day, it would prove incredibly useful to times him asterisk. The girl, however, had already firmly told him she had absolutely no interest whatsoever in participating in wars. Rolling up his sleeves, he menacingly declared it was very inconvenient that she held such a mindset. It seemed he was now fully prepared to drag her away by force. A little blood started to seep from his palm, until the liquid began to gush intensely. Sarah was very frightened by that scene, and the boy was controlling it as he pleased. A divine weapon that used blood, she called for Mary, her bodyguard. But the boy had already taken control of the situation. Looking back, she realized her bodyguard had been defeated. That made the situation even more problematic. Her brother said they needed to leave now, and she told Sarah to run away because things could get dangerous. She needed to play her weapon to defend herself, but she wasn't able to handle that attack. A young man realized that if she asked for help, things would get complicated, so he needed to resolve it immediately. Sarah is about to be attacked, but she ended up being saved by her brother's friend. Silva fell to the ground during the weekend. It was foolish of her to do that, but now she won't be able to resist him. He used his ability to capture her, lifting her body off the ground. Sarah is still quite terrified, and the blonde girl had lost consciousness. The cause of this was her own brother. Desperate, Sarah asked for the protagonist's help. He quickly approached the place, cutting off that boy's tentacles. Who didn't expect this kind of intervention? The blonde girl had been rescued. Witnessing that made Sierra very relieved. The protagonist wants to know what this guy wants with his friend. The pleasant moment they were having had been destroyed. That mysterious guy asked if the protagonist is one of his sister's friends. Not that it was important, but it's better if he doesn't meddle in family matters. The protagonist asked, lying to take care of the girls because he has a face to smash now, and he was going to deal with him immediately. But the guy is surprised by that stance. He warned that there's no merit in defending that girl. Using his sword to cut those attacks is very easy, which left the guy quite impressed. Helping a friend is something completely natural. Striking an attack against him, the guy protected himself with a shield, warning that this was a waste of time. That blood shield is really impressive. It looks like his sword won't work. Against it, he can't waste his mana in this fight. The guy was already prepared to attack, but the protagonist managed to dodge it. Recognizing the protagonist's absolutely infuriating nature, he swiftly declared he'd end this fast, unleashing a volley of attacks, all surprisingly predictable. Then, the boy brandished his blazing fire spitter. Realizing the boy held more than one divine weapon, he understood this was no ordinary adversary. Now, it was the protagonist's moment to unleash fire. Miraculously deflecting every single incoming attack, it seemed they were locked in a perfect stalemate. Witnessing his attacks get intercepted only fueled the fight's growing complication. But his resolve to capture his sister remained unbreakable. He then conjured a chilling spear of pure blood, declaring this move would be their absolute last. The protagonist, unfazed, confirmed it truly would be. With everything they had, the two warriors clashed head-on. From the rooftop, some onlookers found this quite interesting. Gazing upwards, they spotted new arrivals. One of them, upon landing, utterly shattered the sidewalk stones. He had landed directly between them, a clear display of power. He brazenly stated his desire to join the battle too. The protagonist immediately recognized him as a student council member, while the blue-haired guy demanded to know what Zeal was doing here. He cautioned that he was being far too harsh on the kids. The girl declared this behavior utterly embarrassing, especially since he was such a complete weakling. Spotting his two colleagues, he grudgingly ceased his barrage. But Zio, for his part, wished the fight had lasted longer. As his entire body began to glow, he stated they should go all out. His formidable body was now completely encased in armor. Beyond his sheer size, he exuded an incredibly powerful presence. The girl then ordered the muscular one to simply do his job, while she herself summoned forth several heavy chains. This was essential to prevent him from taking any drastic actions. They weren't there to continue a fight. Seeing that magical power, the protagonist realized she was also incredibly strong. Zio, with seemingly little effort, shattered the chains. He then declared that Evelyn had certain responsibilities with the rest of the student council in the esteemed company of Albert, no less. Because of this, he would spend a month on an expedition, deep within the perilous forest. The task began immediately. Realizing he had no choice, leaving, he warned he would claim his sister exactly 1 month from now. The girl sarcastically waved goodbye to the weakling newbie. What a relief that they had all finally departed. These student council members truly are all monsters. Looking back, he quickly checked if his friends were all right. She confirmed she wasn't hurt, then quickly apologized for dragging him into such a mess. Our protagonist, however, declared it wasn't necessary. His only concern was the reason for her fight with her brother. The reason? Her brother, as the next heir, schemes to use her. Upon graduation, he plans to aggressively expand his territory, launching assaults on unexplored, dangerous regions. Lime knows those lands are crawling with formidable creatures, and her brother firmly believes her divine weapon will be a game changer, a powerful artifact in the war. But she has absolutely no desire to fight. Instead, her sole intention is to grow stronger and become the rightful heir. This situation strikingly mirrors our protagonist's own struggles. The crushing problem, however, was her inability to do anything. She's still miles away from being able to defeat him. Sarah countered, insisting that wasn't true, as that girl had managed to protect her, and it seems that ignited a vital spark of hope. Sarah is incredibly grateful for everything that transpired. Even our protagonist felt compelled to express his gratitude. And so, he went directly to the girl to do just that. The ability to save someone is what truly fuels his strength. In the past, he couldn't. He encouraged her to embrace confidence, stating that if she currently lacks strength, she can always train for it. Lime, too, promised to help her on her journey. Initially, she was so overwhelmed she barely knew what to say. But her heart overflowed with gratitude for her new friends. The protagonist knows that last attack could have been utterly fatal. He'll return in a month, so Belle absolutely needs to become stronger. For that, he needs to unlock his unique, hidden ability. and for that, he needs to talk to the comedian. He needs the express permission of the predecessors to acquire new abilities, and for that, he must return to that sacred space. Closing his eyes, he began to concentrate intensely. He began channeling his mana directly through the sheath. There, he was warmly received by all the other predecessors. It had indeed been quite a while since they last saw each other. The boy has a request to make, but they already know exactly what it is, because they had seen everything that transpired in the last battle. That artifact was quite problematic. That guy can shape things freely. It quite strongly resembles Avalon itself. A brief silence then fell. The comedian warned that if he burns that blood, everything will be resolved, and the boy thinks exactly the same way, which is precisely why he so desperately wants his unique ability, something the comedian agreed to do without a moment's hesitation, just to show it had all been a joke. He truly enjoys being a comedian. Charlotte instantly told him to stop with that kind of nonsense, but it's a force much stronger than him. Being funny is cool, he states, but that ability consumes an immense amount of magical power. If he were to use it now, he would quickly be completely drained. But he has one crucial condition for granting it. Before the rematch, you must fire 300 shots per day. Only then will he consider granting this ability to the boy. The only catch? This incredible feat feels utterly unattainable. Currently, he can barely muster 100 shots in an entire day. But the comedian, oh, he's in no mood for excuses. The moment he hits that target, he's ordered to report back. With a final word, he simply snapped his fingers. Instantly, the boy was flung back into his own body. He quickly realized the comedian wasn't just funny, but surprisingly cruel. Soon enough, he grasped that activating this power would demand a complete tripling of his current magical might. The daunting truth? This might just be an impossible ask. Even the ancient predecessors unanimously declared it an impossible challenge. There's simply no known method for the boy to boost his magic to such heights. Yet, they're surprisingly eager to witness the boy's struggle and progress. After all, if he can't grow stronger, he won't stand a chance. So, our protagonist headed straight for the forest. There, he unleashed his shots, effortlessly defeating various creatures. While not overly difficult, the sheer workload was undeniably exhausting. Since hunting creatures is the sole path to boosting his magical power, he resolved to hunt down absolutely everything he could find. His friends, witnessing his power, were utterly impressed, and it was a stroke of luck that they decided to tag along. After all, everyone yearns to become stronger. That burning desire even convinced Line to join the fray. The craving for power now utterly eclipsed any lingering fear. Our protagonist truly has some incredible friends by his side. Their presence significantly boosts his progress. After firing 100 shots, he felt utterly drained, yet a slight increase in power came from his hunting. Still, it was nowhere near enough. That progress felt tragically inadequate. Just then, a terrifying, guttural roar echoed through the forest. It definitely didn't sound like any ordinary orc. Could his friends be in grave danger? Finally, our protagonist located the monstrous creature. It lay sprawled on the ground, seemingly in a deep slumber. And right beside its colossal body stood his two friends, triumphantly celebrating their incredible feat. The girl showered Belle with praise. Even he couldn't help but wonder if his friends had truly vanquished such a beast. And astonishingly, that was exactly what had happened. This was a formidable, sea-level creature. He'd always assumed his friends were operating at a much lower power level. Normally, they'd have no hope of defeating it. So, they devised an incredibly efficient, cunning strategy. First, they encircled the enemy entirely with a wall of ice. Then, the girl unleashed her devastating sound waves, which perfectly reflected off the surrounding ice. It was a truly brilliant and impressive plan. These two possess an absolutely fascinating synergy. This incredible victory was the direct result of their combined, powerful assault. And suddenly, our protagonist was struck with a brilliant idea. Now, he understood exactly how he could unleash even more shots. Meanwhile, a horde of new creatures had ominously appeared. Several orcs, just like the one they'd already conquered, were closing in. Such a massive group is about to become incredibly problematic, especially since they're all absolutely exhausted. But our protagonist, ever the genius, has a brilliant idea. He believes he can still keep fighting. They would have times never times imagined, not even in their wildest dreams, that our protagonist was capable of times all that asterisk. Seeing that he left in such a hurry, the girl suddenly remembered he had something crucial to do. The elders certainly didn't expect the boy to return so swiftly. The comedian, ever the skeptic, hopes he isn't trying to change the terms of their agreement, but the boy calmly stated he had times already Times completed the task. This left them utterly astonished. It's not possible that he did that in just Times 1 day asterisk. The comedian stated Times was the one who made jokes around here, but the boy remained firm. They demanded he prove his supposed change in a battle. He would have to fire all times those shots during a real fight, and could even use other weapons if he dared, unless, of course, he was Times afraid asterisk. But our protagonist? He absolutely loved that challenge. He just needed the signal to be given, and the battle would finally begin. They are all properly prepared, weapons at the ready, and the comedian is absolutely eager to see his progress. The elder gave the starting signal. Bell already had his pistol firmly in hand, poised, but the comedian had already fired the first shot, striking the boy. He scoffed, saying the boy was too slow and desperately needed to improve. As expected from the original user of that weapon, he's much faster. It seems the comedian is in his 100 jokes mode, fully engaged. And our protagonist absolutely does not want to lose this duel. The two fired several times in quick succession, leaving the comedian quite impressed. Charlotte exclaimed, the boy was very good, and now she understood exactly why the elder decided to train him. Indeed, he's incredibly proud of his pupil. The shy one declared that the real battle had yet to begin, and Charlotte did not like his tone of voice at all. But he reminded them they still needed to see if the boy was truly capable of firing shots. Even Adam reluctantly agreed. 100 shots wouldn't be enough. And the boy continued to push himself hard, but that was still not challenging enough for the comedian. They continued firing several more intense shots, and a little more tired, he was noticeably losing his rhythm. Adam had counted them all. The boy had fired 97 shots. Seeing that the battle was becoming uninteresting, the comedian was about to end it, but our protagonist had a trump card. He summoned a powerful, gleaming shield. That way, he would be able to protect himself just a little more. That completely made the comedian rethink his strategy. The boy was even going to use the wind as well. He channeled the wind right through his pistol. The comedian, intrigued, wanted to know his next move. Our hero declared those bullets utterly useless. He amplified his shot, boosting it with a burst of wind. This blew past the comedian's power, leaving him quite stunned by the unexpected outcome. This unique combination lets him surge with incredible power, even when his magical energy is running low. For the first time, the comedian felt true pressure in this fight. Not even our hero's mentor had conceived of such a possibility. Charlotte's cheering him on, desperate for him to defeat the comedian. The comedian demanded to know why our hero hadn't used this brilliant strategy from the start. He reminded him of falling into a trap before, and now it was time for him to return the favor. But simply hiding that ability might not shift the tides entirely. Now, our hero had to skillfully dodge every single one of those shots. And just like that, the battle swung back into balance. Our protagonist was even able to land a hit with the comedian's first shot, especially since his magical power was also dwindling. Meanwhile, our hero remained unwavering in his strategy. The situation had truly become quite complicated. His opponent was on the defensive. It was time to finish this. But the comedian is no easy foe to overcome. He cunningly disappeared behind his blazing flames, completely obscuring his true position from our hero. And with no idea where the shots were coming from, he was soon struck sharply in the back. That hit, however, gave him a vital clue to the comedian's location. But the comedian had already deftly repositioned himself, striking our hero once again. All he needed was to keep vanishing within those fiery plumes. As our protagonist was completely cornered, he had to blast those flames away, using the power of wind. And that's precisely what he did, finally locating the comedian, who could no longer conceal himself behind the inferno. Now, he had a perfectly clear shot at his target. But he was utterly unable to fire any shots. This situation was truly dire. The other predecessors already suspected he might have completely exhausted his magical power, leaving him utterly vulnerable to the comedian's next move. But, in a shocking twist, the comedian had also run out of bullets. The final impact landed, sending the comedian crashing to his knees. He had been pushed absolutely to his limit, just like our hero in that duel, who managed to fire 301 shots. After that, he was completely and utterly drained. He had won by the absolute narrowest of margins. Witnessing our protagonist's incredible effort, the comedian was overjoyed. Extending his hand towards him, he finally approved him, ready to unlock his unique ability. With a polite flourish of his weapon, he helped the boy rise again. The boy, immensely grateful, felt truly recognized at last. He knew he had to master every secret of that divine weapon, and with it, unlocked another incredible ability. He's now absolutely confident he can crush that other bastard. All the comedian truly desires is his pupil's victory in this battle, and he boldly promised to seize that victory. Days flew by as our protagonist relentlessly trained in the forest, for it's absolutely crucial he grows even stronger. He's slowly but surely honing his ability to absolute perfection. Soon, his friends approached, curious to witness his progress. His unique ability truly is an astonishing sight. The girl then asked if he could share some valuable tips, so they could learn to harness such power too. All he could tell them was to keep conquering monsters. That's the only path I know, but I do have a training method to significantly enhance their existing power, he explained. A method you must practice daily. I learned it from my master, he added. You simply need to sit, close your eyes, and focus your minds while making that precise, symbolic hand gesture. This is the most straightforward way to circulate magical power throughout your bodies. By diligently practicing this form of meditation for an hour each day, your magical power will grow more quickly. And what's more, it will help refine it, making power easier to unleash in battle. They wholeheartedly agreed to give this powerful method a try too. While this practice won't yield instant results, in the long run, its effectiveness will be absolutely astounding. His friends immediately began circulating magic throughout their bodies. Our protagonist quickly noticed their unusually rapid progress. Their advancement, perhaps, was truly far above average. He couldn't afford to be left behind, so he resolutely decided to intensify his own training. This would also further amplify his own unique ability. Just 5 days flew by, and the group of friends continued their relentless training. After merely 10 days, they were already fiercely dueling each other, all in a bid to push their limits and grow even stronger. A total of 20 days elapsed, and their diligent training never wavered. Then, after a full month, they finally confronted the bastard once more. But this time, he hadn't come alone to reclaim his sister. It had indeed been far too long since their last encounter. Even the girl herself had clearly grown much stronger. But the bastard simply ordered his servant to seize the girl, claiming he'd handle this nuisance himself. The loyal servant acknowledged his master's commands. However, the girl was absolutely not going to make that task easy for him, immediately unleashing a fierce attack with her divine weapon. Yet, the servant proved swift enough to deftly evade her attacks. Lime, however, would never let her friend face this foe alone. She charged at the servant, her determination burning fiercely. He swore he wouldn't let her be torn from Alice in this desperate fight. But on the other side, it was high time for our hero to settle some serious scores. Before any of that, though, he had one burning question he desperately needed answered. Just what exactly did that monster plan to do with his own sister? Her divine weapon, a truly special artifact, had been passed down through generations. It was capable of controlling people, bending their will through the power of sound. With it, she could transform anyone into a mere battle instrument, making his wars horrifyingly easy to win. A truly despicable goal. He only seeks to make his own life easier, no matter the cost. To him, his own sister was nothing more than a disposable tool. Our protagonist didn't need any further explanation to understand. Because that guy, he was utterly unworthy of being called a brother. He confidently warned that mere anger wouldn't make her weapon work against him. But that was exactly what they were about to witness. The villain found our protagonist's stance quite peculiar, for the pistol was aimed directly at its own user. That's when he began to unleash his truly unique ability. The terrifying flames surged, directed straight at his own heart. Now, they engulfed his entire body in a blazing inferno. This was the soul incineration, an incredibly impressive technique, though the villain, surprisingly, seemed unimpressed. But even that bastard had to acknowledge this was going to be troublesome. Our protagonist had indeed become significantly stronger, and then, mighty wings dramatically erupted from his back. With them, all his physical attributes were massively enhanced. He could now approach his enemy with lightning-fast speed. All the bastard could do was desperately fire a few shots. But it was completely, utterly useless, because his flames could burn away all that tainted blood. This was something the bastard definitely wasn't expecting. It was time for our protagonist to utterly obliterate him until nothing remained. He prepared, without stopping, to land a devastating punch. The bastard immediately conjured a shield for his protection. It managed to withstand the first incredible impact, but it shattered in such a way, it wouldn't possibly stop the second. And just like that, our protagonist managed to land a brutal hit straight to his face, sending the poor fool's body hurtling through the air. The blood he has now is completely useless against me. He should just give up and go home already. But it seems that isn't all he has left to show. Astonishingly, the bastard had stood up once more. His eyes had undergone a complete, terrifying transformation as well, and the very surface of his skin was twisting and shifting. It felt as though his very blood had begun to boil within him. With this monstrous new form, he had become unbelievably more powerful. Our protagonist couldn't quite tell what it was, but that was dragon blood. That ancient ability was twisting his entire body. He now resembled a terrifying, scaled dragon. His raw power had grown exponentially, reaching new heights. That oppressive pressure. It's truly problematic. He then unleashed a chilling warning towards our protagonist. A moment he'd simultaneously cherish with pride and curse with regret. His razor-sharp claws were already poised to strike, for he was about to unleash his absolute, unbridled fury. Bell, eyes locked, keenly tracked his opponent's swift advance. Thanks to his heightened senses, he deftly twisted out of the way. Yet, a shallow, stinging cut still grazed his skin. His formidable opponent paused, visibly intrigued. He was certain his attack had found its mark, but as he pondered, our hero was already charging his next move. He unleashed a torrent of flames, striking his foe with pinpoint accuracy. And now, he was about to make everything explode into a magnificent, earth-shattering blaze. Massive plumes of smoke billowed high into the sky. But somehow, his opponent emerged utterly, perfectly unscathed. With a sneer, he declared the attack utterly pathetic. The scales across his body remained pristine. Not a scratch, no soot, no scorch marks, not even the slightest singe. He roared, charging Bell, ready to tear him limb from limb. Mere fire wouldn't be enough to take down this monstrous foe. So, Bell resolved to meet him head-on, crushing him with his bare fists. The two titans were now on an irreversible collision course. Bell had to deftly evade those deadly claws once more. Only then could he seize his precious chance to strike. He landed a solid blow directly on his opponent's side, feeling the sheer impact reverberate through his own skin, yet he wasn't impressed in the slightest. Those impossibly tough scales were utterly resistant to impact too. But our hero, lost in thought, momentarily let his guard down, and was instantly blindsided by a brutal swing of the dragon's tail. Sent careening, he hurtled violently toward the unforgiving ground. Meanwhile, his opponent began channeling a devastating spell, ready to annihilate him. He knew, without a second thought, he had to defend himself immediately. He blasted a desperate fireball, hoping to deflect the incoming blast. But his opponent's attack proved far more devastating. A colossal explosion ripped through the very air above. Our young hero now looked utterly, profoundly exhausted. Despite his incredible persistence, his body was failing him. He was undeniably pushed to his absolute breaking point. And the dragon? It could unleash countless more of those terrifying attacks, which would, undoubtedly, make things far more complicated for Bell. For our hero would need to dig deep, draining even more of his precious magical power. Meanwhile, down on the ground, his friends were embroiled in another fierce battle. Their enemy, likely a terrifying level B threat, they quickly decided to unleash a perfectly coordinated combined attack. The silent, menacing enemy simply stood, awaiting their first move. Lime was the first to charge, forcing his opponent into a defensive stance. The young warrior plunged his spear deep into the earth. This unexpected move made his opponent hesitate, growing slightly cautious. Only then did he realize he was completely ensnared by towering ice walls. This was it. The girl's moment to unleash her power had arrived. She was already swiftly closing in, blasting powerful sound waves straight at her foe. That combination, they thought, was enough to utterly crush a monster stronger than them. They fully believed the battle was finally over. But the knight, with a chilling smirk, declared it all completely useless. He slammed his staff into the ground with terrifying force. Suddenly, a dark, enigmatic circle manifested before them, greedily absorbing every single sound wave of their attack until absolutely nothing, not even an echo, remained. What an utterly unexpected and devastating twist for the kids. With his staff still firmly planted on the earth, he began to charge an attack powerful enough to annihilate them both. The dark portal behind him pulsed, growing larger and larger, then began to mercilessly unleash the very sound waves it had absorbed. Thanks to his uncanny absorption, their own attacks were now utterly useless. The girl stood frozen, still struggling to process this crushing turn of events. The knight offered a cold apology, stating he had strict orders to take her, commanded by his enigmatic master. But Luan, burning with defiance, was absolutely not going to let that happen. The knight sternly warned the boy not to dare interfere, but Luan never listened, so he needed to be forcefully subdued. Luan, still incredibly inexperienced in battle, was quickly overwhelmed. The girl watched, horrified, as her friend struggled, knowing deep down she absolutely needed to help him. Desperation welled up within her. She couldn't move, her body felt paralyzed. Meanwhile, the boy continued to endure a brutal, relentless beating. Her only wish was for just a little more strength, enough to resist. Then, she remembered the protagonist's inspiring words. That training was the key to unleashing her true power in battle. She just needed to calm herself, to find her center. That way, she could focus, truly concentrate on the magical power pulsating deep within her very being. Believing in herself, truly believing she could fight, she was ready to save her friend. His skull was moments away from being utterly crushed by that terrifying staff, but then powerful sound waves suddenly soared through the air. Lime, with incredible timing, managed to react just in time. It was absolutely not yet time for him to be defeated. The bewildered knight was utterly perplexed by this sudden turn of events. This astonishing burst of power was the direct result of the girl's sound. Lime could hear her friend's distinct melody perfectly, and the music she played was truly beautiful. And that very music transformed into a surge of incredible strength within the boy's body, who was now able to relentlessly pressure his opponent. With newfound vigor, he managed to throw the knight completely off balance. The knight stared, utterly baffled, wondering where this child had drawn so much immense strength from. His own divine weapon then shone, intensely, brilliantly, ready to freeze him solid. Jagged ice plates violently erupted from the ground, surging toward the knight, who instantly knew he was in deep trouble. There was no way he could absorb all of times that asterisk. He was utterly engulfed, completely consumed by the freezing ice. Suspended in midair, our hero was already pushed to his absolute limit. The climactic battle was teetering on the brink of conclusion. But seeing his friend's success, a surge of resolve ignited within him. Now all that remained was to utterly obliterate the villain glaring right back at him. His next move was a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble, a roll of the dice. For he was about to unleash his ultimate, long-hidden trump card. The dragon, meanwhile, was momentarily intrigued, sensing the boy still concealed a wellspring of power. But that wouldn't change a thing, for soon, the boy was about to experience the very essence of true despair. As if on cue, their epic clash intensified dramatically. The dragon, too, began to amplify his terrifying might, surging with dark energy. Poised to unleash a devastating attack, our protagonist, meanwhile, instinctively recognized his foe was prepping his deadliest, most earth-shattering blow. Yet, our hero also had a critical task to accomplish. For his plan to succeed, he simply had to survive this onslaught. The dragon had finally finished charging his colossal ability, a menacing spectacle, unleashing all its raw, destructive power straight at our protagonist. That sphere of pure energy was truly colossal, radiating an unexpected, horrifying size that promised to make their desperate struggle even more grueling. The boy had to react with blinding speed, or face immediate, crushing defeat. His only recourse, his last resort, was to counterattack with everything he had. He unleashed his own surging flames to avoid the direct impact, but the dragon kept relentlessly generating even more, overwhelming power, a raw, untamed force that our protagonist simply could not withstand. He had been utterly overwhelmed, brutally overpowered by his formidable opponent. In that crushing moment, it truly seemed the battle had finally reached its end. But this was not the thrilling, satisfying finale the dragon had so eagerly anticipated. He craved something far more captivating, more utterly exhilarating. Only then, a chilling realization struck him. The protagonist had vanished, only to reappear right behind him. He had been utterly distracted, completely neglecting his own crucial defenses. While he was pouring all his energy into that overwhelming attack, the boy had cunningly conjured a fiery clone, a duplicate born from his very own flames. A clever ruse, which the dragon had unwittingly pulverized. An astonishing ability he never once imagined the protagonist capable of mastering. Still brimming with overconfidence, he arrogantly believed the protagonist couldn't possibly harm him, convinced his attacks were far too feeble. But now, it was finally time for our hero to unveil the true fruits of his relentless training. For through those harsh trials, he had utterly perfected his mastery of magic. The dragon instantly sensed the boy's arm now crackled, thickly coated in raw mana. His previous attacks might not have landed, but this punch was going to be profoundly different. As he finally glanced back, the dragon's eyes widened in dawning, bone-chilling realization. This was exceptionally dangerous. Those vibrant, searing blue flames were undoubtedly the boy's true trump card. He unleashed his glorious fist, smashing it directly into his enemy's unsuspecting back, inflicting upon the dragon an intense, gut-wrenching, agonizing wave of pain. The impact was so powerful, it was strong enough to completely shatter the dragon's legendary scales. Impossible! The dragon roared. To be defeated by a mere child? After what felt like an eternity, he slowly managed to pry open his heavy eyes. His massive body was now completely encased, utterly immobilized by a frigid layer of ice. Both he and his loyal servant had been decisively, utterly defeated. It took a long moment, but eventually they both regained a sliver of consciousness. The dragon thought he would be utterly furious, but instead, by the kids, but since he'd been utterly defeated, it didn't bother him in the least. The girl then stepped forward, a crucial message on her lips for him. She declared she would absolutely not times let him ignite a war, and she certainly wouldn't be anyone's mere tool. He had better understand that, and to everyone's surprise, he actually seemed to agree. He proclaimed he would do exactly as the girl had commanded. Such incredibly strange words left them all utterly bewildered and full of doubt. Even so, Lime bravely dispelled her divine weapon, making the formidable ice vanish. The girl then firmly asked him never to come see her again. Without a word, he simply ordered his mate to accompany him, and the two departed. That intense battle had truly exhausted everyone, and it was seriously impressive that our protagonist had managed to defeat a powerful member of the student council. He modestly admitted it was by an incredibly narrow margin. The girl then stood up, wanting to speak with her cherished friends. She swore that one day she would repay all their incredible kindness. But they were friends, and that's just not how things work between them. Hearing that, she quickly corrected them. No, they were best friends. Words that filled the protagonist with an overwhelming sense of joy. He knew that after this intense battle, they might now be targeted by other formidable members of the student council. So, he absolutely needed to become even stronger, especially against Albert. He simply couldn't bear for another tragedy to ever happen again. He would become the absolute strongest here and reveal his true power to everyone. Eventually, he would finally defeat his brother and become the rightful head of the family. This time, he would definitively protect his sister, no matter what. Many long years then passed, and a monumental battle was about to erupt. Our protagonist had finally found his brother, after so much searching, but now, his brother was overwhelmingly stronger. Not to mention, he'd even become the head of the family. Jin, however, seemed to care little for mere titles. He claimed a terrible curse had been cast upon his little brother. In his past life, he learned the bitter shame of being unable to protect those he truly loved. The suffering he endured that day was truly excruciatingly intense. That's precisely why he stood in this place now, having known true pain. There was no enemy he couldn't defeat. His sister's very fate hung in the balance. Like Mufasa and Scar, these brothers were about to clash in combat, and our protagonist believed he was finally going to change his entire destiny. Attacking his brother with every ounce of power he possessed,